Chapter 35-25. Boom! 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 Before the Sea Tribe's experts could escape from the island, the starry giant swords that blotted out the sky and covered the earth came crashing down. At this moment, all that was left was the dazzling sword radiance, the sword chi that could destroy everything, and the deafening explosion. The starry swords had sealed off everything within a radius of 30,000 miles. The four supreme gods of the Sea Tribe tried their best to form a formation to block the starry swords. The hundreds of Sea Tribe elites were scared out of their wits and could only work together to block the starry swords. The hundreds of thousands of sea beasts had already been intimidated by the starry swords and could only try their best to escape. After being killed by the starry swords, the sea beast army suffered the most casualties. At least 400,000 sea beasts were slashed into pieces on the spot by the starry sword. Minced meat and blood splashed all over the sky. Instantly, the island was covered in blood and flesh, and the sea within 30,000 miles turned dark red. The hundreds of thousands of sea beasts that were lucky enough to survive were also affected by the sword chi and suffered injuries of varying degrees. They were so scared that they lost their minds and tried to escape into the distance. However, the 20,000 starry swords sealed off the area and formed the dazzling starry swords net. In the blink of an eye, the heaven-destroying sword formation was formed. The sea beasts that were trying to escape were all blocked by the sword formation's light wall and had nowhere to run. As for the hundreds of Sea Tribe elites who were controlling the sea beast army, they suffered heavy casualties under the starry sword's net. More than 50 of them were killed on the spot and had their bones crushed. The 40 or so people who were lucky enough to survive were still in a state of shock, their hearts filled with shock. Even the four supreme gods of the Sea Tribe had suffered heavy injuries and were in a sorry state. Only the divine battleship of the Chao-Hai sect was not affected by the starry sword's net. Everyone on the divine battleship was unharmed. Seeing this scene, Su Chao-Hai, the Guardian, and the Grand Elder were all stunned. After regaining their senses, the three of them were overjoyed and cheered excitedly. This is too terrifying. This senior's methods are simply unbelievable. We are saved. Senior, thank you for saving our lives. Ha ha ha. The heavens are protecting the Chao-Hai sect. The four supreme gods of the Sea Tribe were in a completely different mood from Su Chao-Hai and the others. They were all covered in blood and panting, glaring angrily at the Dragon Clan youth. Who are you? Tell me your name if you have the guts. We are nobles of the Ocean Rock Empire, soldiers under the command of the Southern Expedition Marshal. Have you ever considered the consequences of attacking us? Although we are injured, those four Sea Tribes' divine creatures are even more severely injured. If we don't help them, we will be too insensible. The three of them discussed for a while and decided to help Ji Tianqing attack the four Sea Tribes' god kings. Blood Sea Tide Sword. Divine Thunderbolt Palm. Divine Light Fist. Su Chao-Hai, the Guardian, and the Grand Elder used all their strength and used their divine abilities to attack the Sea Tribe's god kings. Unexpectedly, those few sea race divine kings executed divine abilities and supreme skills, easily blocking their attacks. General Nan, who was the leader, even took the opportunity to counterattack. He furiously thrusted out spear shadows that filled the sky towards the Protector and the Great Elder. The Guardian and the Grand Elder couldn't dodge in time and were immediately struck by the spear shadows. Just as the two of them were about to be severely injured, Ji Tianqing swung his sword at the critical moment and destroyed the spear shadows. Bam! 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 Hundreds of violent spear shadows exploded in front of the two of them. Billions of divine light fragments burst forth. The Protector and the Great Elder were relieved of a heavy burden and revealed a look of joy after surviving a calamity. At this moment, Ji Tianqing said coldly with an expressionless face, "Back off, don't add to the trouble." Su Chao-Hai, the Guardian, and the Grand Elder blushed and returned to the divine worship in shame. Indeed, with their strength and means, they couldn't help much. Instead, they added to the trouble. However, as God King experts, it was a little embarrassing for them to be despised like this. However, the other party was a high and mighty expert of the dragon tribe. Although they were ashamed, they weren't angry. Instead, they felt that they were too careless and reckless. The battle didn't last for too long. In just a short 100 breaths, everything was over. The 4 sea tribes' god kings were killed one by Ji Tianqing. They were all smashed into pieces and their godheads collapsed. As for the sea beast army and dozens of sea tribe experts, they were all killed by the sword formation and turned into a bloody pulp. Chapter 35-26. The battle had ended. The sea around the island gradually regained its calm. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and removed the sky-vanquishing sword formation. The surging waves that were thousands of feet tall also gradually stopped. The godly light fragments and blood rain that filled the sky gradually dissipated. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing kept the godhead fragments of the 4 sea tribe deity kings, as well as the king-grade divine artifacts and infinite space rings that were scattered among the ruins. Then, he landed on the Chaohai sect's divine ship. Su Chaohai, the guardian, and the Grand Elder had already led more than 20 survivors. They lined up neatly and bowed to Ji Tianqing to express their gratitude. "Senior, thank you for saving our lives. The Chaohai sect will never forget this." Under Su Chaohai's lead, everyone bowed and thanked Chen Fan in unison. Their tone and attitude were very sincere. Even though they were severely injured and covered in blood, they still had to endure the pain. However, everyone endured the pain and endured their injuries. They had to thank Ji Tianqing first. Ji Tianqing nodded calmly. He raised his hands and said, "Everyone, please rise." Su Chaohai and the others stood up. Su Chaohai gestured for the disciples and deacons to return to the divine ship to heal their injuries. Only he, the guardian, and the Grand Elder were left. They looked at Ji Tianqing with gratitude. "Senior, the Chaohai sect is unable to repay your kindness. We only hope that you can tell us your name. In the future, we will pray for you day and night. The sea tribe has always been cruel and domineering. There is almost no place for outsiders like us to survive in the Xiaolong region. If we were not lucky enough to meet you, the entire Chaohai sect would have been destroyed." The 3 of them surrounded Ji Tianqing and couldn't help but express their gratitude. Ji Tianqing was still calm. He looked around the island and didn't say anything. Su Chaohai and the other 2 felt a little awkward when they saw that Ji Tianqing didn't react. Therefore, Su Chaohai asked Ji Tianqing, "Senior, how should I address you?" "Heavenly Dragon Deity King." Ji Tianqing casually replied. Su Chaohai quickly cupped his fists and said respectfully, "So it's Heavenly Dragon Deity King, Junior greets you. May I know where Senior cultivates?" He originally wanted to worm his way into Ji Tianqing's friendship. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing was not interested at all. He asked straightforwardly, "There is a mineral vein under this island. What kind of mineral vein is it?" "Ah." Su Chaohai was stunned for a moment, then he scratched his head awkwardly. At this moment, he suddenly understood many things. As it turned out, this senior sky dragon did not know him at all, nor did he care about the survival of the Chaohai sect. In comparison, he was more interested in the mineral veins under the island. Su Chaohai thought about it again. This was also human nature. It was a matter of course. After all, the Chaohai sect didn't even know deity King Tianlong, let alone have any relationship with him. Why would he save the Chaohai sect for no reason at all? After figuring this out, Su Chaohai quickly replied, "Senior's insight is truly admirable. You're right, there is indeed a mineral vein under this island. And it's a very precious and rare meteorite mineral vein." "Meteorite mineral vein?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and smiled with interest. If the Chaohai sect could take such a high-grade mineral vein, they would be able to achieve great things. It's no wonder that the Ocean Rock Empire would send the Oceanic Tribe and Oceanic Beast Army to kill you. Oh right, is there any crystal core in the meteorite mineral vein? Su Chaohai hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand to signal the Guardian and Grand Elder to leave so that they could lead the disciples to clean up the battlefield. After that, he led Ji Tianqing into the divine worship and they entered a secret room for a detailed discussion. Senior Sky Dragon, please allow me to explain to you what happened. Su Chaohai was very humble, but he was not in a hurry to answer Ji Tianqing's question. Ji Tianqing could guess what he was thinking. Su Chaohai was most likely going to talk about how difficult it was for the Chaohai sect and how much they needed the mineral vein. However, he did not refuse. He nodded and said, "All right, tell me about it." Su Chaohai heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Half a month ago, 2 elders of the Chaohai sect passed by this place and discovered by chance that there was a mineral vein under this island that had been desolate for 10,000 years. Moreover, the divine energy within it was very dense. It should be a high-grade mineral vein. One of the elders stayed here while the other elder returned to the sect to report the situation. My Chaohai sect had been living in a remote corner for the past few thousand years and had been struggling to survive. The appearance of this mineral vein made me so excited that I had to obtain it no matter what. Therefore, I mobilized all the elites of the Chaohai sect and went out in full force. We've occupied this island and set up a sealing formation. I, the Guardian, and the elders went underground to investigate and found that it was a meteorite mineral vein. According to my deduction, there must be a star crystal core in the mineral vein. Moreover, it is not an ordinary planet crystal core. It is most likely a star crystal core. Upon hearing this, Ji Tianqing could not help but nod and smile. Even an ordinary star crystal core is enough to forge an intermediate king-level divine artifact. If it is an earth fiend or heaven star crystal core, it can even be used to forge an upper king-level or supreme divine artifact. Together with the mineral vein, the Chaohai sect will be able to develop rapidly with such abundant resources. Su Chaohai smiled bitterly and shook his head. Senior Sky Dragon, you may not know this, but the Chaohai sect is not qualified to enjoy the stellar crystal core. As long as I can obtain the mineral vein, I will be satisfied. Ji Tianqing frowned and asked, "Are you going to offer the stellar crystal core to the Ocean Rock Empire?" "Of course not." Su Chaohai quickly waved his hand and said angrily, "The Oceanic tribe is cruel and tyrannical. I hate them to the core. How can I offer them a tribute? I intend to offer the meteorite crystal core to the Reincarnation Island Master, the peerless god of the underworld. Only in this way can the Chaohai sect exchange it for a few spots to enter the Fortune Divine Palace and establish a relationship with the Reincarnation Island. If we have the Reincarnation Island as our backer, the Oceanic tribe will not dare to bully us. Offer the meteorite crystal core to the god of the underworld. Exchange it for a spot to enter the Fortune Divine Palace." Ji Tianqing frowned and looked puzzled. Su Chaohai was stunned by Huang Xiaolong's reaction. He quickly asked, "Senior Sky Dragon, you are not from the Reincarnation Island, are you?" "N." Ji Tianqing answered and asked, "Is there a twist in this?" Su Chaohai suddenly understood and said, "No wonder you don't know about this. It is like this, I have heard of a legend about the Fortune Divine Palace. It is said that 1,000 years ago, when the god of the underworld achieved great success in his cultivation and unified the Reincarnation Island, he chanced upon a supreme divine bead in the Reincarnation Island's forbidden area. That divine bead has the miraculous effect of nurturing all living things and opening heaven's fortune. Not only can it awaken the intelligence of plants and beasts, but it can also enhance the divine spirit's talent. However, the god of the underworld had long surpassed the god-king realm and had no use for that divine bead. Therefore, he built a Fortune Divine Palace and placed the divine bead inside, providing it to his subordinates and geniuses to enhance their strength. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 35-27. Su Chaohai's eyes shone brightly as he spoke, revealing a look of longing. It was obvious that he had a strong desire for the legendary Fortune Divine Palace and the Supreme Divine Pearl. Ji Tianqing's heart skipped a beat, and an idea flashed through his mind. He nodded calmly and said, Su Chaohai, continue. Seeing Huang Xiaolong's interest, Su Chaohai continued, every living being that enters the Fortune Divine Palace, regardless of race, whether it's a flower, a tree, a bird, or a beast, after being baptized by the Fortune Divine Light, their intelligence and talent will be enhanced. In the first 200 years, the elites and geniuses under the god of the underworld would often enter the Fortune Divine Palace to be baptized. But after a while, there was no longer any effect. Later, the god of the underworld changed the rules, and the Fortune Divine Palace would only open once every 100 years. Whether it was the soldiers and geniuses under his command, or the forces of various races that were willing to serve him, as long as they paid the appropriate price, they would be able to enter the Fortune Divine Palace. In this way, the god of the underworld won over the hearts of the people, and won a good reputation and praise. In the past few hundred years, he had subdued many forces and experts from various races. After listening to Su Chaohai's story, Ji Tianqing had a better understanding of the Fortune Divine Palace. He nodded slightly and asked, Su Chaohai, have you seen the god of the underworld? Is he on the Reincarnation Island now? Su Chaohai laughed self-deprecatingly and shook his head, Senior must be joking. How could a small fry like me be qualified to see the true face of the God Emperor? Not to mention me, even many of the territorial lords on the Reincarnation Island have not seen the god of the underworld. After all, the god of the underworld had not shown himself after he took over the Reincarnation Island and stabilized the situation. According to the rumors, the God Emperor is not on the Reincarnation Island. He might be comprehending a divine technique in the outer space. Usually, the authority of the Reincarnation Island is controlled by Commander Mingi and the Blood Prison Marshal. They are the right-hand men of the god of the underworld. They are also respected higher deity kings. Ordinary people can't even meet them. Knowing that the god of the underworld had not shown up for hundreds of years, Ji Tianqing's mind suddenly became active. Especially the Fortune Divine Palace and the Supreme Divine Bead that Su Chaohai had mentioned, which made him even more restless. Then, he asked Su Chaohai about the Reincarnation Island. Su Chaohai told him everything he knew. An hour later, the exchange between the two of them ended. Next, it was time to get to the main topic. Ji Tianqing looked at Su Chaohai, pointed at the island under his feet, and said, This king wants that mineral vein and the meteorite crystal core. Is there a problem? Su Chaohai was startled for a moment. His face was a little ugly. It was obvious that he felt the pinch. However, he was already mentally prepared for this. But when Ji Tianqing made this request, his heart ached so much that he couldn't breathe. After hesitating for a moment, he took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and made a decision. No problem. If it wasn't for Senior's help, the tidal Sea sect would have been destroyed, and we would have become the Sea tribe's slaves. We are already very lucky to be able to keep our lives. As for the mineral vein and crystal core, they should belong to Senior Tian Long, even though the tidal Sea sect's efforts were in vain. However, the fact that he and his 20 or so disciples were able to survive was already a blessing from the heavens. What more could he ask for? It would be foolish of him to not let go of the mineral vein. He would even offend Tian Long. Ji Tianqing looked at Su Chaohai with a smile, and asked, Are you sure there's no problem? Are you sincere? Since he had already made the decision, he couldn't regret it. Otherwise, he would be looked down upon. Thinking of this, Su Chaohai quickly nodded, and said firmly, Of course I'm sincere. Ji Tianqing laughed. All right, the meteorite crystal core is mine. I want half of the mineral vein, and the other half is for the tidal Sea sect. You guys are already miserable enough. With half of the mineral vein's resources, you should have a chance to recover. Su Chaohai was stunned when he heard these two sentences. He couldn't believe his ears. His eyes widened, and a look of disbelief appeared on his face. He couldn't believe that someone would be so generous as to give him half of the mineral vein. That was a huge mineral vein that was 800 miles long. Even if it was half of the mineral vein, the stellar heavenly stones it contained would be worth 400 to 500 billion. After the initial shock, he was filled with joy and surprise. Su Chaohai quickly bowed to Ji Tianqing and thanked him emotionally. "Thank you for your generosity, Senior Tian Long. I represent all the disciples of the Title C sect to thank you for your generosity." Su Chaohai said a lot of words of gratitude. Of course, they were all sincere and convinced. Ji Tianqing smiled and waved his hand. "All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's start mining now." Su Chaohai quickly agreed. "Senior, please wait for a moment. I'll go and gather them now." Ji Tianqing waved his hand again. "Your men can rest. I'll arrange for people to mine the mineral vein. Just follow me." All right." Su Chaohai looked around. He didn't see anyone else beside Ji Tianqing. However, he believed that a powerhouse like Heaven Dragon Deity King would have many mysterious tricks up his sleeve. As expected. After 100 breaths, Su Chaohai saw for himself. Deep under the island, a silver mineral vein, 800 miles long and 10 miles wide, was lying quietly in the rock layer. This mine was like a huge silver dragon, entrenched in the depths of the earth and sleeping for tens of thousands of years. Only 3 people had entered the underground. Ji Tianqing, Su Chaohai, and the 300 zhang tall Yank. Su Chaohai felt dizzy when he saw Yan Ku, who was as big as a rock giant. He was shocked beyond words. Heavens! This stone giant is a mid-god king. A mid-god king is actually Senior Tian Long's follower and guard. Could Senior Tian Long be a high god king? He must be. Otherwise, how could he kill the entire sea race and sea beast army by himself? After the shock, Su Chaohai was puzzled. He and Ji Tianqing stood on top of the mine and watched as Yan Ku entered the rock layer alone and sneaked into the mine. A thought appeared in his mind. Senior Tian Long said that only this stone giant was mining the mineral vein. If he's alone, how long is he going to mine? Su Chaohai was worried. If this dragged on for too long, the Sea Rock Empire would send an army for revenge. That would be troublesome. However, what happened next left him dumbstruck. He had truly widened his horizons. He saw Yank enter the meteorite mineral vein and use the divine ability that Ji Tianqing had taught him. He excavated the ore at an unimaginable speed. Every time he used the divine ability, he could excavate a few dozen miles of the mineral vein. The mysterious dazzling golden light continued to wash the mountainous pile of ores. In just 15 minutes, the ores within a radius of several dozen miles had turned into hundreds of millions of star divine stones of the same size that had been purified and refined. This was the work of over 100 monarch god experts in 10 days. Yank's methods were simply amazing. Chapter 35-28. Initially, Su Chaohai thought that it would take at least a month to excavate the mine. Moreover, it would take more than 200 people from the Chaohai sect to excavate the mine day and night. But now, Yank only used 16 hours to excavate the entire mine. What was even more terrifying was that not only did he excavate the mine, he even refined and purified the ores. The half of the mine that was handed over to Su Chaohai was actually 2 billion star god stones of the same size. This was just too terrifying and unbelievable. Su Chaohai was still in a daze when he received the star god stones and kept them in his spatial ring. Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly and said, 2 billion star god stones are worth 200 billion normal god stones. It should be enough for the Chaohai sect to recover. We shouldn't stay here for too long. The people from the Ocean Rock Empire might be here soon. You should leave. After hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Su Chaohai finally came back to his senses. He hurriedly nodded in agreement and bowed to Ji Tianqing, Senior Tianlong, you are the savior of the Chaohai sect, the reincarnated parent. Although the Chaohai sect is weak, we will never forget your kindness. In the future, if you have any orders, the Chaohai sect will do it even if we have to climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire. Su Chaohai's eyes were slightly red as he said these words of gratitude. Ji Tianqing did not take it to heart. He only nodded and waved his hand, indicating for him to leave first. After Su Chaohai thanked him profusely, he returned to the damaged divine ship and left the nameless island with the 20 or so surviving disciples and the corpses of many disciples. When the divine ship flew into the sky, he could not help but look at Yank. He sighed in his heart, a mid-level god king with such great skills is willing to be Senior Tianlong's follower. I can imagine that Senior Tianlong is a high-level god king with great skills. It's a pity that the Chaohai sect is too weak and can't enter Senior Tianlong's eyes. If we can get on Senior Tianlong's good side, the Chaohai sect will definitely prosper. Although Su Chaohai was full of regret, he knew his own limits. After lamenting for a while, he gave up on his unrealistic fantasies and started to think about how to restore the Chaohai sect's strength. With 200 billion god stones worth of resources in his hands, he had enough confidence. Master, this is the meteorite crystal core that you asked for. On the nameless island, Ji Tianqing, Yank held a red crystal the size of a washbasin. The crystal core was as clear as ice, but it was also as red as blood. It emitted a scorching heat and a violent fluctuation of divine power. Ji Tianqing took the meteorite crystal core and examined it carefully for a while. Then, he smiled in delight. Not bad, it is indeed a star-level crystal core. Moreover, the quality of this crystal core is extremely high. It should be an Earth-level stellar core. There were countless stars and stars and stars, stars, star and stars, stars. And stars. Most of them were ordinary planets of little value or planets that contained a small amount of resources. Star S to a star, stars, star, 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 stars. By star among the stars, there were also differences in strength. There were ordinary stars, earth fiend stars, and heaven star stars. Some people said that the reason why a star was called a star was because it existed forever and would never fall. But that was not the case. There were times when stars would be destroyed and fall. When an entire star collapsed, it would turn into billions of pieces that drifted in the void. Most of them would be burned to ashes. Only the most elite stellar cores could be preserved. They would either drift in the endless starry sky or land on some stars. However, the probability of this happening was very small. It was precisely because of this that stellar crystal cores were exceptionally precious and rare. Ordinary stellar cores were priceless treasures. An Earth-class stellar crystal core was a peerless treasure that was hard to come by in 100 years. Not only could it be used to refine king-grade high-grade divine artifacts, but it could also provide an endless amount of star energy that could be used repeatedly. And the current Ji Tianqing lacked treasures of this level. For God King's Godhead fragments, 200 billion spirit stones worth of resources, and an Earth-class meteorite crystal core. This trip was not in vain. Ji Tianqing weighed the meteorite crystal core and kept it in his spatial ring. He left the island with satisfaction. Yank had nothing to do, so he returned to the distorted spacetime and went into seclusion to cultivate. Ji Tianqing flew across the sky alone and rushed towards the reincarnation island. The Fortune Divine Palace that Su Chaohai mentioned had successfully piqued his interest. Moreover, the god of the underworld was not on the reincarnation island. The current reincarnation island was guarded by Commander Mingi and Marshal Blood Prison. They were just two high-level god kings. Even if they had reached the 9th heaven realm, Ji Tianqing was not worried. After all, his methods and rich experience were enough to deal with any god king. Only the 5 emperors, who had surpassed the god king realm and reached the highest realm, could make him helpless. Peerless divine pearl. It can release the holy light of creation and increase the talent and intelligence of all living beings. Interesting. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself, and a playful smile appeared on his face. The nameless island was not far from the reincarnation island. It was only a 10-day journey. The Ocean Rock Empire reacted quickly. In just 3 days, a large group of God King realm experts and millions of sea beasts headed towards the nameless island to seek revenge. Unfortunately, the nameless island had already collapsed into ruins. Ji Tianqing and the people from the Chaohai sect had already left, and the Sea Tribe had missed their target. The Sea Tribe's God Kings roared and cursed in anger for a long time before leaving resentfully. Next, they would definitely trample the Chaohai sect and kill every single one of them to vent their anger. However, Su Chaohai had already expected this and used his fastest speed to escape with the Chaohai sect's family members. 10 days later, the Sea Tribe's army arrived at the Chaohai sect and missed their target again. At this time, Ji Tianqing had already arrived at the Reincarnation Island. In these 10 days, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was in charge of the journey. He stayed in the distorted spacetime and cultivated in seclusion for more than a year. He refined the godhead fragments of the 4 Sea Tribes' God Kings. Although he had only added a few divine Tao laws and his strength had increased slightly. However, the blood flame sacred tree had gained a lot and its growth was gratifying. During the battle on the nameless island, Ji Tianqing had slaughtered 600,000 sea beasts, hundreds of Sea Tribes experts and 4 God Kings. The blood flame sacred tree had absorbed too much blood and soul essence and had grown over 1,000 feet tall. Now, it was already 200,000 feet tall. In terms of divine artifacts, it was already a peak mid-grade king realm sacred tree. If there were a few more times, it might break through and become a high-grade king realm sacred tree. This discovery made Ji Tianqing very happy. At the same time, he felt a little awkward. The blood flame sacred tree was about to become a high-grade king realm sacred tree, but he was still a 5th heaven realm god king. He was still far from becoming a high-grade god king. Could it be that he was inferior to a tree? Chapter 35-29. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to the Reincarnation Island. 1,000 years ago, he had come here many times and even stayed for 2 or 3 years. However, back then, the Reincarnation Island had no master and was in a state of disunity. A few ancient clans were high above and protected the Reincarnation Island in name. But in reality, the ancient clans were also fighting openly and secretly for the control of the space-time passage. They often fought fiercely. The Reincarnation Island's territory was only 20% of the Boundless Heaven continent's territory. There were 18 territories on the island, and each territory's leader was an overlord. They were constantly at war with each other. For the sake of territory, and also for the sake of fighting for cultivation resources, starting wars was a common thing. Of course, this was the Reincarnation Island 1,000 years ago. The situation was very chaotic. Ever since the god of the underworld unified the entire island, the chaotic situation had ended. First of all, the ancient clans had obediently tucked their tails between their legs and kept a low profile, not daring to cause trouble. Secondly, the 18 territories' leaders had all pledged loyalty to the god of the underworld. The god of the underworld had probably used some method to control the lives of the various territories' leaders. Therefore, those territories' leaders were extremely loyal to the god of the underworld. Even Ji Tianqing would use Yang's life as a threat to force Yang to work for him. It would be strange if evil people like Azura and the god of the underworld did not use some method to control the lives of so many territories' leaders. Of course, not long ago, Ji Tianqing had already removed the divine power in Yang's body. In other words, Yang had already regained his freedom, and Ji Tianqing would no longer threaten him. However, he had no intention of leaving. Instead, he stayed by Ji Tianqing's side loyally, willing to be Ji Tianqing's guard. For nearly 1,000 years, the Reincarnation Island had been very peaceful. The 18 territories' leaders had all submitted. They were the god of the underworld's trusted subordinates, and they guarded the Reincarnation Island. It could be said that nothing could go wrong. Because of this, the god of the underworld could not come out of seclusion and hand over power to Commander Styx and the Blood Prison Marshal. When Ji Tianqing landed on the Reincarnation Island, the sun was setting in the west. The setting sun was like blood, and the sunset glow filled the sky. Boundless blue waves slapped against the reefs, shores, and beaches. Thousands of feet away from the shore, there was a lush forest. Ji Tianqing flew across the sky at lightning speed, heading straight for the center of Reincarnation Island. After a few hours, the God Kingdom where the gods gathered appeared in front of them. There were many towns located on the plains. The Reincarnation Island's location was special. It was surrounded by the endless sky sea. Therefore, the sea breeze whistled all year round, and there were often shocking tsunamis and hurricanes. Fortunately, there were experts guarding the surrounding regions of the island. Every time a tsunami or hurricane struck, those experts would use their divine abilities to avert the disaster. Ji Tianqing landed in a city and snuck into the city as a young man from the dragon race. Millions of deities and commoners gathered in this city that spanned over 300 miles. Ji Tianqing strolled around the city. His divine sense quietly spread out to explore the local conditions and customs. The situation was the same as before. Most of the millions of commoners in the city were from the god race. However, there were many other races mixed in, and even the sea race. Races from all over the world were able to live in harmony and trade on an equal footing here. After all, this was the territory of the god of the underworld. Even the arrogant and domineering sea race would not dare to act rashly here. At the same time, Ji Tianqing found more than a dozen shrines in the city. They all worshipped statues of the god of the underworld. Almost every day, many commoners would go to the shrines to kneel and pray. When Ji Tianqing passed through the city, he had a panoramic view of the city. He left quietly and continued to rush to the center of the Reincarnation Island. In the next few days, he passed by several empires and dozens of cities. He would stop for a moment in each city and release his divine sense to observe. The results were the same as before. The empires and cities were prosperous, peaceful, and stable. A large number of shrines had been built in each city to worship the statues of the god of the underworld. Going to the shrines to worship and pray had become a weekly homework for the commoners. It was like a mission and a mission. Ji Tianqing could not help but suspect that the god of the underworld was the same as the Shura god emperor. He was also collecting the power of faith of the commoners in order to cultivate some kind of divine skill. In addition, he also found a large number of laborers in each god kingdom. Those lowly slaves and laborers had to do hard labor on the Reincarnation Island or go to the endless sky sea to mine. Ji Tianqing observed for a while and found that these slaves and laborers were all from other races. There were basically no god race. Even if there were, they were very few criminals who had committed heinous crimes. After all, the god race was the noblest race in the god realm. The ascenders from the lower realm and the gods of other races were very lowly. If these people did not have a force to take them in, they could only do hard labor and could not escape the sea of suffering for the rest of their lives. After discovering this situation, Ji Tianqing spent a little time to inquire about the details. After investigation, he learned that this was the order of the god of the underworld. Every region and every empire had to pay a certain amount of taxes every year, which were also cultivation resources. And those god kingdoms needed to collect enough slaves and laborers to complete their missions. The vast majority of slaves and laborers could not escape the miserable fate of their lives. And the commoners of the god race had long been accustomed to this and did not feel sympathy. In any case, in their eyes, other than the god race, all other races were lowly and despicable. Ji Tianqing's heart was somewhat heavy about this. Previously, this was the situation in the boundless heaven continent. I didn't expect it to be the same on the reincarnation island. I reckon those 3 bastards on the other 3 continents will do the same. They are all doing the same thing, collecting the power of faith of the commoners and crazily accumulating cultivation resources to carry out some unspeakable things. The ordinary god race is not a victim, so they will not oppose the tyrannical rule of the 5 emperors. But all the living beings of the various races are harmed, and the various ancient clans are also the ones who suffer losses. Only they will oppose. With this thought in mind, Ji Tianqing could not help but wonder, what is the God-Emperor realm above the God-King realm like? Why do the 5 emperors collect the power of faith of the commoners and crazily seize resources? What are they trying to do? With such doubts in mind, Ji Tianqing walked and stopped all the way. 10 days later, he arrived at Yudu. Yudu was the capital of Reincarnation Island. This city was located at the center of Reincarnation Island and covered an area of 500 miles, accommodating millions of gods and commoners. The city was abnormally prosperous. Even on the surrounding mountains outside the city, many courtyards and palaces were built. This was the core of Reincarnation Island and also the nest of the god of the underworld. Most importantly, the creation divine palace was in Yudu city. When Ji Tianqing entered Yudu, he deeply felt the prosperity and clamor of this place. The city gates were full of people, and people had to line up to be checked before entering or leaving. When he entered the city, all he saw were palaces and pavilions. It was a magnificent sight. The god race who entered and left the shops, tea-houses, and wine shops were all well-dressed and dignified. Clearly, this place was not only rich, but also a gathering place for elites and experts. Sword piercing the 9 heavens, sword piercing the 9 heavens. Chapter 35-30. Ji Tianqing was here for the Fortune Divine Palace. He had a meteorite crystal core in his hand. As long as he offered it to Commander Styx and Marshal Blood Prison, he could exchange it for a spot to enter the Divine Palace. However, he was reluctant to part with the Earth Fiend Star Core unless he had no other choice. On top of that, he wasn't familiar with the situation in Yudu and didn't know anything about the Fortune Divine Palace. After strolling around Yudu for 4 hours, he entered the city center to find a place to gather information. The Mystic Sky restaurant was one of the more luxurious restaurants in the city center, and its business was booming. Ji Tianqing scanned the restaurant with his consciousness and found several hundred Divine Monarch Realm experts gathered in the restaurant. There were even a few God King Realm auras. In the restaurant, the waiters who served tea and wine were all in the Heaven God Realm. Ji Tianqing stepped into the Mystic Sky restaurant and spent 5,000 divine stones to order a jug of wine. He then sat down in the middle of the main hall. He sat alone at a table and drank leisurely, appearing to be very low-key. Secretly, he was eavesdropping on the discussions in the main hall. There were more than 30 tables in the main hall, and more than 100 Divine Monarch Realm experts were gathered there. Although these people were from different races and dressed strangely, this didn't stop them from talking. However, this did not stop them from talking loudly. Words such as Fortune Divine Palace, receiving baptism, and gaining enlightenment on the spot, were often mixed in between their words. After all, the Fortune Divine Palace only opened once every 100 years. Every time, only 100 lucky people could receive the baptism of the divine light and improve their talent and aptitude. This time, the Fortune Divine Palace opened 3 days later. In the last half a month, there were many experts in Yudu. In the restaurants and tea houses in the city, the common people were discussing the Fortune Divine Palace. Ji Tianqing listened for a while and obtained a lot of information about the Divine Palace from the crowd. At this time, the 2 waiters at the entrance of the main hall suddenly shouted respectfully, "Welcome, young Master Yuan." Hearing this sudden shout, the main hall fell silent for a moment. After that, everyone looked towards the entrance with faces full of excitement and anticipation as they started to whisper in each other's ears. "Young Master Yuan is here. Since he went into seclusion last time, he hasn't harmed Yudu for 3 years, right? Hey, be careful when you speak. Don't let young Master Yuan hear you. I heard that the domain lord of Soaring Wind spent a lot of effort to get a transcendent divine pellet. Young Master Yuan has already broken through to the Divine King realm after consuming that divine pellet. Young Master Yuan broke through to the God King realm. Does that mean he's going to enter the Fortune Divine Palace? Isn't that obvious? Soaring Wind region's domain lord had a noble status and was greatly appreciated by the God Emperor. Although young Master Yuan is a dandy, he has received many benefits. That brat was a scourge in the past, always stirring up trouble and making Yudu restless. Now that I've broken through to the Divine King realm and entered the Divine Palace to receive the baptism, won't I be able to ascend to the heavens in the future? Oh right, there's still young Master Qian upstairs. He's still drinking in the private room. Did young Master Yuan come here to show off in front of young Master Qian? That makes sense. These two hedonistic young masters had always been at odds with each other, both openly and covertly. However, young Master Qian had already broken through to the God King realm 50 years ago. Thus, young Master Yuan often suffered losses. Now that he finally broke through to Divine King, he definitely has to get back at them. Hee. There's going to be a good show today. Most of the hundreds of god monarchs in the hall were locals of Yudu, and many of them were descendants of influential officials. As the saying goes, one doesn't mind watching a good show. The rumored dandy young Master Yuan had yet to appear, but many of the onlookers had already imagined what would happen next. Everyone was discussing fervently and excitedly. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, had an indifferent expression. He was drinking by himself and thinking about many miscellaneous matters. At this moment, 4 majestic guards in golden armor strode into the hall with sabers and swords in their hands. Immediately after, 2 servants bowed and welcomed a young man from the God clan in a golden robe and a luxurious divine crown. That young man was dressed extravagantly and had an extraordinary aura. He held his head high and had a domineering air about him. Seeing him enter the hall, many of the onlookers stood up and greeted him with cupped fists. Greetings, young Master Yuan. We haven't seen each other for 3 years, and young Master Yuan is even more elegant than before. I heard that young Master recently broke through to the God King realm. Congratulations. At least a dozen tables of people were sucking up to young Master Yuan and fawning over him. Young Master Yuan had a confident smile on his handsome face. He looked at the crowd with a smile and said, "Yo, why are there so many people here today? You guys are quite well informed. Could it be that you are gathered here to congratulate me and give me a surprise?" Young Master Yuan had a cynical and playful attitude. 4 majestic golden armored guards followed beside him with a ferocious demeanor. No matter how one looked at it, this was the standard of a dandy young master. Although everyone could tell that he was mocking them, there were still many people who hurriedly nodded and took the opportunity to curry favor with him. Young Master Yuan smiled contemptuously and walked up to the 2nd floor. "Alright, you guys celebrate here. I'll go upstairs to drink." 4 golden armored protectors and 2 servants hurriedly escorted him upstairs. However, a skinny God clan youth wearing a black robe with golden patterns walked out of the heaven private room on the 2nd floor. This person held a wine pot in his hand and leaned against the railing. He looked down at young Master Yuan at the stairs and said expressionlessly, "I've booked all the private rooms on the 2nd floor." His voice wasn't loud, but it reverberated in the hall and entered everyone's ears clearly. The hall instantly quieted down. Everyone's eyes gathered on the black-robed youth. It's young Master Qian. It's the son of the Yudu city master, Qian Yuan. Hee. I've long heard that young Master Qian and young Master Yuan don't get along. It seems like it's true. Isn't this a slap to young Master Yuan's face? The show is about to start. Can young Master Yuan take this lying down? Let's see how he retaliates. In the crowd, a wave of whispers sounded out. As expected, young Master Yuan's face turned cold. He stared at young Master Qian sharply and sneered, "Qian Yuan, there are only 5 of you. What right do you have to book all the private rooms? You're purposely going against me." "Humph, I've just broken through to the Divine King realm a few days ago. Are you feeling guilty and scared? Are you purposely trying to disgust me?" Qian Yuan glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "Yuan Ji, don't flatter yourself. I've just broken through to the 2nd level of the Divine King realm 3 days ago. I've already set up a banquet here to entertain my friends. I've already booked the private rooms. If you don't believe me, you can ask the innkeeper. From the 1st level to the 2nd level in just 50 years. Yuan Ji's face changed, and his heart skipped a beat. His previous confidence and high spirits instantly vanished into thin air. He looked at the innkeeper with a dark face and shouted, "Is what he said true?" The innkeeper looked at him and then at Qian Yuan on the 2nd floor. He could only smile bitterly and didn't dare to say anything. After all, these 2 young masters had shocking backgrounds. The innkeeper couldn't afford to offend either of them. Young Master Yuan was well aware of this, but he didn't say anything else to avoid further embarrassment. His face returned to normal. He chuckled and said, "Since young Master Qian has booked the 2nd floor and is hiding in a private room with your friends, of course, I don't want to join in the fun. I'll just stay in this hall and drink with my friends from all over the world. It's not only above board, but also fun with the people. Today, I'll pay for all the drinks in this hall." As soon as he said that, not only did he humiliate Qian Yuan, but he also made hundreds of people in the hall cheer. Many people thanked Yuan Ji and took the opportunity to flatter and praise him. Seeing Qian Yuan return to the private room with a gloomy face, Yuan Ji felt refreshed. He looked around the hall and his eyes fell on Ji Tianqing. He pointed at the table and said, "Sit there." Chapter 35-31. The dozens of tables in the hall were filled with people. Only Ji Tianqing was sitting at the table in the middle of the hall. He was the only one there. Yuan Ji pointed casually, and the 4 golden armored guards and 2 servants walked toward Ji Tianqing. Thump! 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 The 4 golden armored guards surrounded Ji Tianqing, and the bearded leader knocked on the table. He looked down at Ji Tianqing and said arrogantly, "Kid, can't you be a little more observant? Young Master Yuan wants to have fun with the people. Why don't you step aside?" The other 3 golden armored protectors, the 2 servants, and the spectators in the hall all focused their attention on Ji Tianqing. Even Yuan Ji stood to the side, waving his fan calmly, waiting for Ji Tianqing to step aside. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing unhurriedly put down his wine cup. Without even looking at the guard, he said, "I went first. Why should I give up my seat?" "Hey!" The leading golden armored guard glared at Ji Tianqing and scolded, "Kid, you don't know how to appreciate favors. Do you know who this is? The famous young Master Yuan, the only son of the Zone Master of Soaring Wind, a young immortal king, a top genius. I'm flattering you by asking you to give up your seat. If you don't, I'll throw you out." As he said that, he pretended to attack. The other 3 golden armored guards were also eager to give it a try. "Wait." Yuan Ji waved his fan pretentiously and said with a smile, "How many times have I taught you not to be so rude? You'll make me look like a bully." This young hero doesn't want to step aside because he cares about his wine money. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw a spatial ring on the table in front of Ji Tianqing. "There are 10,000 immortal stones here. Take the money and leave." Yuan Ji thought he was a forthright person. His words and expression were always arrogant. After throwing the space ring, he sat opposite Ji Tianqing. Everyone thought that Yuan Ji had given Ji Tianqing a way out, and he should take the money and leave. However, Ji Tianqing didn't even look at the space ring. He said calmly, "I just want to sit here and drink." I don't want to be disturbed. I won't step aside from this table. I don't want your immortal stones. Although his expression was very calm, his tone was very firm and contained an unquestionable tone. Immediately, Yuan Ji frowned and looked at him coldly. The 4 golden armored guards were furious. They rubbed their fists and palms, ready to attack. As for the 2 manservants of the restaurant, they hurriedly winked at Ji Tianqing and transmitted a voice to advise him to be sensible and not to anger eldest young Master Yuan. There was a burst of whispers in the crowd. Is that kid out of his mind? How dare he embarrass Yuan Ji? Ha ha ha. Young Master Qian only dares to embarrass Yuan Ji because he has a strong background. Who does this kid think he is? How dare he provoke Yuan Ji? I bet this kid won't live to see tomorrow's sun. His corpse will soon be on the streets. Yuan Ji always takes revenge for the smallest grievance. This kid is digging his own grave. Just wait and see. That kid will be thrown out of the mysterious sky tower soon. Ji Tianqing and Yuan Ji heard the crowd's discussion. Ji Tianqing's expression remained the same, and no one could see any change in his expression. Yuan Ji was even more furious. He felt he had lost face in public. Qian Yuan humiliated him in public. Even a nobody dared to provoke him. It was outrageous. Ha 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 ha. Yuan Ji no longer pretended to be kind. He grinned and sneered. It seems that after 3 years of seclusion, many people have forgotten my methods. Since someone doesn't know how to appreciate my kindness, don't blame me for being rude. All of you better remember this, not just anyone has the qualifications to challenge this young master. With that, Yuan Ji winked at the 4 golden armored guards. The 4 golden armored guards could no longer suppress their anger and murderous intent. They immediately pulled out their swords and placed them on Ji Tianqing's neck. Kid, you're digging your own grave. Bah! You're shameless. You've angered Yuan Ji. Kneel down and beg for mercy, and you can save your life. Kneel down and beg for mercy, and I'll let you get out. The 4 golden armored protectors' faces were filled with murderous intent and ferocious expressions. However, Ji Tianqing turned a blind eye to the swords on his shoulders and in front of him. He slowly put down the wine cup and wine pot, then said with an indifferent tone, "No one has ever dared to put a sword on my neck. Because those who dared to do so are all dead." Seeing his unfathomable appearance, the spectators in the hall and the 4 golden armored guards were all stunned. Even Yuan Ji was stunned for a moment. He stared at Ji Tianqing with his eyes wide open. Everyone thought that Ji Tianqing would counterattack on the spot, and blood would splatter everywhere. However, after 2 breaths of time, nothing happened. The 4 golden armored protectors came back to their senses and laughed contemptuously. Ha 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 ha. You little bastard, who are you trying to scare? Humph. You're pretty good at pretending, kid. Fight me if you have the guts. Kid, you're pretty good at bragging. I just don't know if your head is hard enough to withstand this Sikh saber. The audience in the hall also came to their senses and roared with laughter. Yuan Ji laughed contemptuously. He looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of sarcasm. I thought I met a great person, but I didn't expect you to be a lunatic. Alright, I'm in a good mood today and can't be bothered to argue with you. Get out of here. As he spoke, Yuan Ji waved his hand disdainfully and shooed Ji Tianqing away. Ji Tianqing wasn't angry. He stared at Yuan Ji and suddenly revealed a playful smile. You've obtained the right to enter the Fortune Divine Palace and will be baptized by the Divine Light in 3 days. Yuan Ji was stunned for a moment, but then he waved his fan proudly and said with a smile, of course. Only an elite genius like me has the right to enter. A lowly alien like you has no hope in your life, so don't even think about it. Sigh. I'm too kind. Why would I talk so much to an ant like you? Ji Tianqing took a deep look at him. The corners of his mouth curled into a sneer as he muttered, "Very good, it's you." Yuan Ji was confused. He frowned and asked, "What nonsense are you talking about, you lowly peasant?" Ji Tianqing didn't pay any more attention to him. He stood up and left the hall, quickly disappearing into the crowd on the street. Yuan Ji and the audience in the hall couldn't help but laugh and talk contemptuously for a while. But soon, everyone threw this matter to the back of their minds. He was just a lunatic. No one would take him seriously. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 35-32. Yuan Ji was in a good mood today. Although there were two small incidents in the mysterious heavenly tower. First, Qian Yuan humiliated him in public. Then, he met a reckless lunatic. But he felt that he had resolved the awkwardness with his intelligence, and he had established a kind and amiable image. The hundreds of spectators in the hall cheered for him, praising him like stars surrounding the moon. This was the best proof. Moreover, he felt that he had won the competition with Qian Yuan. A long time ago, his father, Domain Lord Feng Ling, had taught him a principle. He could be a hedonistic young master. After all, this was determined by his family background. But he had to be a smart, far-sighted, and scheming hedonistic young master. He could not be brainless and arrogant. In the past, Yuan Ji did not listen and found it annoying. But now, he felt that he had done it. Yes, after breaking through to the God King realm, this young master is indeed different from before. This young master is that far-sighted and scheming hedonistic young master. As long as this young master maintains this intelligence, I can take over the position of Domain Lord in the future. Leaving the mysterious heavenly tower, Yuan Ji was still intoxicated on the way back to his courtyard outside the city. He sat in a golden carriage pulled by two Pegasus, flying across the night sky at lightning speed, heading toward the Thousand Pine Courtyard in the south of the city. Four loyal golden armored protectors followed closely around the golden sacred chariot. Yuan Ji reclined on a divine jade recliner covered in snow fox fur, recalling today's events with a complacent attitude. However, thinking of Qian Yuan's face, his anger had not yet subsided. Damn Qian Yuan, didn't he enter the Fortune Divine Palace 100 years ago and receive the Divine Light's baptism to be reborn? Otherwise, with that pig brain of his, how could he smoothly break through to the God King realm and reach the second stage in 50 years? 3 days later, when this young master enters the Fortune Divine Palace and receives the Divine Light's baptism, I will also be reborn. Soon, this young master will catch up to Qian Yuan and surpass him. Yuan Ji was full of anticipation and longing for the Divine Light's baptism in 3 days. He felt that this was the biggest turning point in his life. 15 minutes later, the golden carriage arrived at the Thousand Pine Courtyard and landed on the square. This courtyard was located on Thousand Pine Mountain in the southern part of the city. It was built in a very grand manner. Not only were there pavilions, terraces, gardens, and waterside pavilions in the courtyard, there was also a magnificent palace and a divine pagoda that was thousands of feet tall. Having such a courtyard was a symbol of nobility. Yuan Ji walked out of the carriage and returned to his residence with the 4 golden guards. The 4 of you, stand guard outside the door. This young master is going into seclusion tonight to comprehend the divine skill that Father imparted to me. Then, he entered a secret chamber in the depths of the palace to comprehend the godly technique. The 4 golden armored guards bowed and said, "Yes, sir," in unison. After Yuan Ji entered the secret room and closed the door, they split into 2 groups, one guarding the door of the secret room and the other guarding the entrance of the tunnel. The night was long, and the dark passage outside the secret chamber was very quiet. The 4 golden armored protectors had nothing to do, so they secretly transmitted their voices and discussed what had happened today. The words and actions of that madman were still their laughingstock. However, they had no idea. When they had left Yudu, that lunatic had followed the divine carriage to Thousand Pine Courtyard. In a secret room with a radius of 300 yards, divine light filled the air. Yuan Ji lay comfortably on the divine jade couch, holding a jade scroll in his hand. He silently comprehended the godly technique secret manual in the jade scroll. As an ignorant and incompetent hedonistic young master, it was impossible for him to cultivate painstakingly. Even if he cultivated in seclusion, he sought comfort and comfort. He definitely couldn't stand loneliness and hardship. The ability he had today was all thanks to his father's endless resources. Suddenly, Yuan Ji felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if a pair of eyes were staring at him. He subconsciously scratched his neck and turned around to look at the corner of the secret room behind him. However, the corner was empty. There was nothing there. Strange. Yuan Ji muttered to himself and turned back to continue reading the jade scroll. However, from the corner of his eye, he saw a white figure 10 yards in front of him. He was shocked and hurriedly raised his head to look forward. He saw a young dragon who was 10 yards tall and wearing a white robe looking at him expressionlessly. Ah! Yuan Ji trembled in fear and screamed subconsciously. The jade scroll in his hand fell to the ground. You. Are you a human or a ghost? Yuan Ji curled up his body, hurriedly took out a divine sword, pointed at the dragon young man, and asked harshly. What? The young dragon was Ji Tianqing. He sneered at Yuan Ji and said, a mighty godly king is afraid of ghosts. You're really useless. Yuan Ji gradually calmed down and saw that the young dragon in front of him was the madman from the mysterious heavenly tower. It's you, madman. Why are you here? How did you get in? He wanted to say madman. However, on second thought, this person looked very calm, mysterious, and scary. He didn't look like a madman. Moreover, how could a madman sneak into the Thousand Pine courtyard and enter the secret room without anyone noticing? Ji Tianqing smiled and said, of course I followed you in. What? What do you want? Yuan Ji's back grew colder, and the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger. Although he was foppish, he wasn't stupid. Previously, in the mysterious heavenly restaurant, he couldn't see through Ji Tianqing's strength, so he didn't take it seriously. After all, in Yudu, there were too many weak people who were like ants. However, it was different now. The other party had sneaked into the secret room without him noticing. What did that mean? He couldn't see through the other party's strength because the other party was too strong. Moreover, the other party wasn't here to chat with him. This was clearly revenge. Sir, don't be rash. If there's anything, we can talk about it. You know, I'm the son of the Fengling region master. Don't act recklessly, or the consequences will be unimaginable. If you are lacking in cultivation resources and treasures, this young master can also be generous with his money. Yuan Ji panicked. He was bluffing and stalling for time while secretly casting spells to control the divine formation in the secret room to send out a distress signal. The 4 golden armored guards outside were all high-level divine lords. Although they were loyal to him, they were obviously not enough to be killed by the other party. They could only be cannon fodder. However, there was still a divine king in the courtyard. He was the commander of the guard sent by the Fengling region master to protect him. However, Ji Tianqing looked at him with a half-smile. His deep eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Don't struggle in vain. I've already set up a seal in the secret room. No one will know what happened here. Don't worry, you'll die happily and won't feel any pain. I'm just borrowing your identity. You should help me. Ji Tianqing's tone was mocking as he walked towards Yuan Ji. Don't come over. Yuan Ji panicked and slashed at him with his sword. At the same time, he waved his hand and sent a beam of golden light into the divine formation in the corner of the secret room. Chapter 35-33. Unfortunately, Yuan Ji's resistance was futile. When the golden light reached the corner of the secret chamber, it was blocked by an invisible seal. The secret chamber's divine formation was not activated, and the signal for help was not sent out. Just as Ji Tianqing had said, the secret chamber had been sealed by him. No one knew what was happening here. At the same time, Yuan Ji's divine sword was caught by Ji Tianqing's right hand with his index and middle fingers. Gotcha! Ji Tianqing's right hand exerted force, and the low-grade king-grade divine sword's tip was broken. Yuan Ji was dumbfounded. Before he could react, Ji Tianqing released an invisible divine soul force that struck him. Rumble! Yuan Ji's sea of consciousness exploded with a thunderous boom. Then, he closed his eyes and sank into the endless darkness, falling into an eternal slumber. Ji Tianqing did not cause him any external injuries. He only destroyed his divine soul and shattered his godhead. As a result, Yuan Ji died on the spot, but his body remained intact. Plop! Yuan Ji's body lost its support and fell onto the jade bed. Ji Tianqing reached out his right hand and pressed it against Yuan Ji's forehead. A white light rushed out from his palm. Soon, more than a dozen godhead fragments flew out from Yuan Ji's head. Swoosh! 5-colored divine light flashed, and Ji Tianqing's godhead flew out from his forehead and entered Yuan Ji's body. In the next moment, Yuan Ji came back to life and opened his eyes. From now on, Ji Tianqing was Yuan Ji. He stretched his limbs and twisted his neck. Soon, he got used to this frail divine body. Then, he stored his dragon clan's body in the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda. Just like that, Ji Tianqing possessed Yuan Ji's body without anyone noticing. 3 days later, he could enter the Fortune Divine Palace unimpeded without paying any price. However, there's a small flaw. My Godhead and Divine Soul's aura are different from Yuan Ji's. A godly king expert who is familiar with Yuan Ji might be able to see through it. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing decided to refine Yuan Ji's quintessence fragment. First, he wanted to obtain Yuan Ji's memories so that he wouldn't reveal any flaws. The second reason was to fuse with Yuan Ji's divine soul, which could be disguised as his aura. After making up his mind, Ji Tianqing took out the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda and placed it in the middle of the secret chamber. Taking Yuan Ji's quintessence fragment with him, he entered the distorted spacetime to refine it. At this moment, the 4 golden armored protectors were still guarding outside the hidden chamber. They discussed the events of the day in low voices, occasionally letting out light laughter. The atmosphere was extremely cheerful. They had no idea that their master had already changed. Moreover, their time of death was fast approaching. 2 days passed quickly. The thousand-pine courtyard was very calm, without any disturbances. Although Yuan Ji stayed in the secret chamber and didn't show up, no one dared to disturb him. Everyone knew that Huang Xiaolong would soon enter the Fortune Divine Palace to receive the Divine Light's baptism. This was the greatest opportunity in his life, and he couldn't allow any mistakes. It was late at night again. A white light flashed in the secret chamber, and Ji Tianqing left the distorted spacetime and returned to the secret chamber. At this time, he had already refined Yuan Ji's quintessence fragment. Not only did he obtain Yuan Ji's divine soul memories, but he could also disguise his divine soul aura. Even God King Realm Masters who were familiar with Yuan Ji would find it hard to see through his disguise. Perhaps, only Yuan Ji's father, the Soaring Wind Region's domain lord, could see through his disguise. Everything is ready, I only need to wait for tomorrow to enter the Fortune Divine Palace. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself, then suddenly remembered something. Oh right, there's still a promise that hasn't been fulfilled. Thus, he waved his hand, sending out a ray of divine light, opening the door to the secret chamber. Swoosh! The 2 golden armored protectors guarding the door were leaning against the wall, chatting and laughing. When the door to the secret chamber suddenly opened, the 2 golden armored protectors jumped in fright. They quickly straightened their backs and put on a stern expression. Ji Tianqing leaned against the divine jade couch with a frivolous look on his face as he said, "The four of you, come in, this young master has orders for you." The two golden armored protectors at the door hurriedly complied, bowing as they entered the secret chamber. Then, the two golden armored protectors guarding the entrance also entered the secret chamber. The four golden armored protectors stood side by side in the middle of the secret chamber with their heads slightly lowered, waiting for Ji Tianqing's orders. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing raised his hand and closed the door to the secret chamber. Seeing this scene, the four golden armored protectors' hearts were filled with excitement. Because all of them had the same thought, young master must have a secret mission for us, this means that young master has great trust in us, we can get a lot of rewards again. Just as they had expected. Ji Tianqing looked at them with a smile, saying, "The four of you have followed this young master for more than 800 years, and have always been at my beck and call, loyal and devoted. In order to flatter and please this young master, you have worked hard and done all kinds of evil deeds. Robbery, murder, arson, defamation, framing, and so on, you are already so evil that you are oozing with pus." Although this sentence was a little awkward to hear. But the four golden armored protectors were still very happy, and hurriedly bowed, saying that these were all things that should be done, and that it was an honor to serve this young master, and so on. Ji Tianqing nodded and sneered mockingly, "From now on, you don't have to do evil anymore. This young master wants to reward you with a chance to be a human again. If there is a next life, remember not to be a bad person." The four golden armored protectors were even more confused, and they looked at Ji Tianqing with a dazed expression. "Ah! Young master, what do you mean? This? Why don't I understand? Young master, we have little talent and knowledge, can you explain?" Ji Tianqing looked at them and said with a smile, "I said before, no one can put a sword to my neck, because they are all dead." As his voice fell, he raised his hand and shot out 4 rays of white light, attacking the 4 golden armored protectors. Whoosh whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! The 4 golden armored protectors had no time to dodge at all, and the white light instantly pierced their foreheads and hit their godheads. They only felt a boom in their heads, and their consciousness fell into endless darkness, and they lost consciousness. Thump thump thump. In the blink of an eye, the 4 golden armored protectors had their godheads shattered, and they turned into corpses and fell to the ground. Until the moment of death, they still didn't realize what was going on. Didn't young Master Yuan value the 4 of them the most and bring them with him wherever he went? Why did he kill them personally? Why was this? Unfortunately, they would never know the answer. Ji Tianqing was not interested in the godheads of the 4 golden armored protectors, and he was too lazy to bother to deal with their corpses. He casually shot out a ray of 9 heavens divine fire and enveloped the 4 corpses. Soon, the corpses, armor, and belongings of the 4 golden armored protectors were burned to ashes. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 35-34. After dealing with the 4 guards, Ji Tianqing pondered in the secret chamber. He remembered that there was one more important thing he had yet to do before entering the Fortune Divine Palace. Hence, he changed back to his original appearance and entered the distorted spacetime of the Divine Pagoda to find Yun Yao, who was still cultivating in seclusion. The blood flame sacred tree was still growing, and its height was close to 200,000 feet. The sacred tree released surging god force, and it was even more vigorous than before. Everyone benefited greatly from cultivating under the sacred tree, and their progress was rapid. Only Yun Yao was still stuck at the peak of the God Monarch realm, unable to break through to the God King realm. Even after cultivating for so many years, she was only able to increase her peak of the God Monarch realm by 30 times. Ji Tianqing used his divine consciousness to wake Yun Yao up and asked her about her situation. Yun Yao's expression was a little gloomy, and she shook her head. "Now that I've reached the peak of the God Monarch realm, my strength is 39 times that of a normal peak God Monarch. It must be because I'm missing the divine bead, and there are no signs of a breakthrough. The divine world is vast, and even if the divine bead is left in the divine world, it would be difficult to find it. It would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Ji Tianqing smiled and comforted her, "Don't be discouraged, the seventh divine bead is no ordinary item, it's a supreme-grade God-King realm rare treasure. No matter where it ends up, it will definitely cause a phenomenon and reveal its extraordinariness." "Oh right, I'm in the Reincarnation Islands Yuta now. I heard that the god of the underworld obtained a supreme divine bead in a secret realm on the Reincarnation Island 1,000 years ago. That divine bead contains the light of creation." Ji Tianqing told Yun Yao about the divine bead and the Fortune Divine Palace. After listening to Huang Xiaolong's explanation, Yun Yao's dim eyes brightened. She asked expectantly, "Fortune Divine Palace? That divine bead contains the light of creation. Tianqing, do you want to enter the Fortune Divine Palace to see if that divine bead is what I need?" "Yes, I do have this intention." Ji Tianqing nodded his head and said, "That's why I asked around in Yudu and took over a profligate son that could enter the divine palace." Yun Yao pondered with a frown and murmured, "The 6 divine pearls I've fused with before are vast sea, star, longevity, earth spirit, wind, fire, and light. This includes almost all of the attributes of divine power. There are only a few remaining, such as darkness, creation, and reincarnation." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and analyzed, "Yao Guang is an ancient goddess, and also the holy and glorious mother of the human race. She would never possess the power of darkness because she represented creation, new life, and light. As for the power of samsara, that was not what peak divine kings could grasp. Only by surpassing the divine king and reaching the level of the god emperor could one see through the cycle of death and reincarnation. If that's the case, we can eliminate the possibility of darkness and reincarnation. That Fortune Divine Pearl is most likely related to you." Yun Yao's eyes brightened. She said expectantly, "I have a mysterious connection with the divine orb. As long as I'm within a certain range, I can sense the divine orb's existence." "You're in Yuta now, right? Then I can sense it personally and determine whether the divine pearl in the Fortune Divine Palace is what I need. If it is, we have to find a way to get it. If it isn't, there's no need for you to take the risk." "Yes, that's why I'm looking for you." Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. Then, he brought Yun Yao out of the distorted space-time and appeared in the secret room. Yun Yao sat cross-legged on the soft couch and closed her eyes to circulate her skills. Soon, she entered a state of complete concentration. Her consciousness was ethereal, as if it was floating between heaven and earth, extending infinitely. The Fortune Divine Palace was in Yudu, and the Thousand Pine Courtyard was in the south of Yuda city. The distance between the two should not be more than 800 miles. At such a close distance, Yun Yao should be able to sense it. However, Yun Yao sensed with her heart for 100 breaths, but there was still no reaction. Ji Tianqing was anxious and worried, but he did not disturb her and waited patiently for the result. Then, Yun Yao seemed to have sensed something. She suddenly frowned and revealed a complicated expression. Ji Tianqing wanted to ask, but seeing that she was focused and her consciousness seemed to be searching and groping, he held back. It was not until 7 minutes later that Yun Yao's forehead was covered in sweat that she stopped circulating her skills and retracted her wandering consciousness. Phew, she heaved a sigh of relief and frowned as she pondered. Ji Tianqing asked, "How was it? Did you sense the aura of the divine pearl?" Yun Yao nodded, but then shook her head and said bitterly, "I searched a radius of 10,000 miles, but I didn't sense the aura of the divine pearl. When my consciousness spread 30,000 miles, it reached its limit. The strange thing is that I vaguely sense the aura of the divine pearl again. It's just that I can't determine its direction, and I can't get closer. An ordinary peak divine lord's consciousness could cover a radius of 10,000 miles. Yun Yao was special. Her consciousness could cover a radius of 30,000 miles. Even so, she could only vaguely sense the aura of the Divine Pearl. The Divine Pearl is clearly in the Fortune Divine Palace, and the Fortune Divine Palace is in Yuda City. But your consciousness can only sense that the Divine Pearl is 30,000 miles away. This shouldn't be. Ji Tianqing frowned and was puzzled. Yunyao thought for a while and asked, Tianqing, are you sure that the Fortune Divine Palace is in the city? Have you seen it with your own eyes? Is it possible that the Fortune Divine Palace is actually outside the city, in a hidden place? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, the news I heard from various sources proves that the Fortune Divine Palace is indeed in the city. Tomorrow, I will enter the Fortune Divine Palace as Yuan Ji to receive the Divine Light Baptism. But the entrance to the Fortune Divine Palace is in the God Emperor's Palace. That's strange, how can this be? Yun Yao was also puzzled. Ji Tianqing frowned and analyzed, could it be that the Divine Pearl is not in the Fortune Divine Palace? Or is there something else in the Fortune Divine Palace? Seeing that Huang Xiaolong was so persistent and eager to solve the mystery, Yun Yao quickly comforted him, forget it, Tianqing, don't worry about the Divine Pearl's location. Anyway, I can sense that the Divine Pearl is indeed what I need. You just need to wait until tomorrow to enter the Fortune Divine Palace to receive the baptism, then wait for an opportunity to snatch the Divine Pearl. She paused for a moment and then reminded Huang Xiaolong solemnly, there will be many people entering the Fortune Divine Palace tomorrow, and most of them are experts. The Fortune Divine Palace is in the God Emperor of the Underworld's lair, and there will definitely be a large number of God King realm experts guarding it. I don't feel at ease with you acting alone. You must be careful. Why don't you bring along Yank and Chao Qingyu and ask them to assist you? Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said in a low voice, it will be inconvenient if I bring them along, and I will be more agile on my own. Moreover, I don't want to wait until tomorrow to enter the Fortune Divine Palace with others. I will take action tonight, and I must find out the exact location of the Fortune Divine Pearl in advance. This matter concerns your fate, so I must be cautious and do my best. Chapter 35-35 Yun Yao had been trying to dissuade Ji Tianqing. It was too risky. However, Ji Tianqing insisted on taking action tonight. He had to figure out the location of the God Bead. After all, he was here for the Creation Divine Bead. He didn't care if he could enter the Divine Palace or receive the baptism of the Divine Light. Yun Yao couldn't dissuade him and could only give up. She thought about it again. There would be too many people entering the Divine Palace tomorrow. It would be hard to find a chance. Taking action early and entering the Creation Divine Palace alone might have a higher chance of success. However, the problem was, how to enter the Creation Divine Palace. Tianqing, do you have a way to sneak into the Divine Palace? If you can't enter early, you can only wait until tomorrow. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and nodded. Although the God of the Underworld set a rule that we can only enter the Creation Divine Palace for a set period of time, and only 7 days. However, Yuan Ji, who I took over, is the only son of Soaring Wind Region's Domain Master. Soaring Wind Region's Domain Master is ranked in the top 3 among the 18 Domain Masters in terms of strength and status. He is highly regarded by the God of the Underworld. I should be able to enter early with a little maneuver. Yun Yao nodded but still asked worriedly, will this work? Is it safe? Ji Tianqing smiled and said, it's not unsafe. Yuan Ji is a hedonistic young master. No one will be surprised if he does anything out of line. Okay, then be careful. Yun Yao was slightly relieved. She reminded him, however, your safety is the most important thing. If you can't do it, you'd rather give up than take the risk. Even if the God of the Underworld isn't on Reincarnation Island, Commander Mingi and Martial Blood Prison are still in Yudu. I understand. Ji Tianqing nodded. After that, Yun Yao stayed in the distorted space and continued to cultivate. Ji Tianqing returned to the secret chamber and changed back into Yuan Ji's body. He began to take action. He opened the door of the secret chamber and walked out. It was late at night, and the courtyard was lit with sparse lanterns. It was exceptionally quiet. There were 2 teams of guards patrolling through the night, but those were all weaklings in the Divine Lord realm. Ji Tianqing quietly left the thousand-pine courtyard without alerting anyone. Shua! He flew across the night sky at lightning speed and entered Yudu through the night. Yudu was too prosperous, and it was like a city that never slept. Even though it was late at night, the city was still brightly lit and noisy. Furthermore, only 2 of the 4 city gates were closed. 2 of them were still open in the middle of the night. Ji Tianqing smoothly entered Yudu and rushed to the center of the city. Along the way, he had already thought of his next plan. If Huang Xiaolong wanted to enter the Fortune Divine Palace in advance, there were 3 obstacles that he had to overcome first. The first obstacle was the ceremonial officer in charge of tomorrow's ceremony. This person was a middle-level divine king and was in charge of hosting tomorrow's ceremony. He was also in charge of distributing identity tokens to over 100 people who were receiving the baptism. Only with a special token could one move freely within the Fortune Divine Palace. As for the second obstacle, it was the guard commander Qingju, who was also a mid-level divine king. This person was in charge of checking the identity tokens and verifying the identity of those who entered. He had the authority to let them in or not. As for the third obstacle, it was the high priest who guarded the creation altar. This person guarded beside the altar and was in charge of opening the altar and releasing the creation divine light. If Huang Xiaolong couldn't get this person's permission, he would be chased out even if he entered the Fortune Divine Palace. Ji Tianqing's first target was the ceremonial officer, Chongzheng. In the dead of night, the lights in the mystic Nether Palace were dim. Chongzheng, who was wearing a black robe and a luxurious divine crown, was reading in the study. He held a gilded roster with both hands. There were 100 names written on it, along with their corresponding identity information. In a few hours, the centennial baptism ceremony would be held in the square of the God Emperor Palace. At that time, there would be at least 100,000 people attending the ceremony. Chongzheng had hosted the ceremony several times and had never made any mistakes. This was due to his caution and meticulousness. In the past few days, he hadn't closed his eyes for a single moment. He had repeatedly checked and supervised every step of the ceremony, not allowing the slightest mistake. After looking through the roster again and confirming that there were no mistakes, Chongzheng put down the roster and closed his eyes to rest. The elites and geniuses entering the Fortune Divine Palace for the baptism this time, other than those who have made outstanding contributions, most of them are descendants of nobles. Countless influential figures had poured out all their wealth to send their bloodline into the Fortune Divine Palace. Of course, it's also thanks to these nobles. Otherwise, how could I have hundreds of billions of wealth with such a leisurely position? Chongzheng muttered to himself, and the corners of his mouth curved into a playful smile. Although he was cautious and meticulous, he was also greedy for money. The Ministry of Rights was a leisurely position without any real power. It couldn't be compared to those powerful generals, commanders, and domain lords. If he didn't take advantage of the baptism ceremony to receive tens of billions of cultivation resources every 100 years, he would be a pauper. He might even become the poorest mid-level god king. Right at this time, the guard commander outside the study reported respectfully, reporting to the ceremonial officer, young Master Yuan requests an audience. Young Master Yuan. Chongzheng immediately opened his eyes and frowned. The only son of the domain lord of Soaring Wind, that notorious spoiled brat. The guard commander remained silent and didn't dare to answer. The ceremonial officer dared to judge Yuan Ji like this, but he didn't have the guts. Because Yuan Ji was standing in the courtyard outside the study. Chongzheng thought for a moment and asked again, isn't he already in the roster? He's entering the Fortune Divine Palace tomorrow. Why are you looking for me at this time? This time, before the guard commander could answer, Yuan Ji's voice came from outside the door. "Lord Chong, can't I come to visit you?" Yuan Ji stepped into the study with a smile. Chong Jing frowned and was a little unhappy. He didn't have a good impression of this presumptuous and arrogant spoiled brat. Unfortunately, this spoiled brat's father was the domain lord of Soaring Wind. As a ceremonial officer, he didn't dare to offend him. "All right, all of you can leave. I'm going to talk business with young Master Yuan." Chong Jing suppressed the anger in his heart and waved his hand, indicating for the guards to leave. Then, Yuan Ji closed the door of the study and set up a ceiling array to prevent anyone from eavesdropping. Chong Jing was a little wary when he saw Yuan Ji's actions. He asked, "Young Master Yuan, what are you doing?" Yuan Ji walked up to him and sat down at the desk. He looked at him with a smile and said, "I'm giving Lord Chong some money. Are you interested?" Chong Jing was stunned for a moment and sneered, "With your status, you've already been selected. Why are you giving me money?" "It's not about that." Yuan Ji waved his hand and lowered his voice. He said in a playful tone, "I want to enter the Fortune Divine Palace now." Chong Zheng's eyes widened and he scolded with a serious face, "Nonsense. This is against the rules. I won't make an exception." "Ha ha ha." Yuan Ji sneered and said, "Enough, Lord Chong. You've made a lot of exceptions these years. Everyone turns a blind eye to it. Who would meddle in other people's business? Cut the crap. 50 billion, do you want it?" Chapter 35-36. 50 billion. Chong Jing hesitated. His pupils constricted, and he licked his lips subconsciously. To be honest, he was very tempted. He sighed inwardly. No wonder Yuan Ji was the dandy young master of the Yuan family. He was too generous. This price was enough for an ordinary noble to buy a spot. Of course, Chong Jing wouldn't agree so easily. He pretended to hesitate and said, "Yuan Ji, you know I can't make this decision. After I pass, there are still 2 lords inside. If they don't agree, I don't dare to take over. If Commander Mingyi in the Blood Prison Marshal find out, I'll be severely punished." Yuan Ji sneered again and said in a mocking tone, "Okay, stop acting. You just want to raise the price, right? 50 billion. As long as you have a token, you don't need to worry about the rest. I'll deal with the 2 lords inside." Chong Jing was a little embarrassed, but he quickly covered it up with a smile. "I also believe that with Yuan Ji's status, it shouldn't be difficult to persuade the 2 lords. All right, since young master is so sincere, I'll help you with this." After that, he decisively took out Yuan Ji's identity token and handed it to Yuan Ji. "Lord Chong, you're really straightforward." Yuan Ji chuckled and took out a space ring and handed it to him. There were mountains of god stones, god pills, talismans, god weapons, and all kinds of materials in the space ring. They were worth about 50 billion. Of course, those were Yuan Ji's own wealth. They were all ordinary goods, and there were no king-level treasures. Chong Jing put away the space ring with a smile and scanned it with his divine sense. After making sure the amount was right, he was in a particularly good mood. He asked, "Yuan Ji, I'm very confused, so I'm asking. In another 10 hours, you will be able to enter the Celestial Palace legitimately. Why did you spend so much money tonight just to go in a few hours earlier?" Yuan Ji took the token and got up to leave. He said as he walked, "The earlier I go in, the better I can get a good seat. Plus, I can stay in the God Palace for a few more hours at the cost of only a few billion. I think it's worth it. After all, what a genius like this young master lacks the most is opportunity. Who knows, he might have comprehended some kind of divine ability. That's something that even tens of billions of resources can't buy." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand to remove the ceiling formation and walked out of the study. "Ha ha ha." Chong Jing looked at his departing figure and sneered disdainfully. He thought to himself, bah. Your reputation as a trash is known throughout the city, yet you still have the nerve to call yourself a genius? If you weren't born in the main family of the soaring wind region and had endless resources, would you be worthy of becoming a divine king? To be honest, Chongzheng was very jealous. After obtaining the identity token, Ji Tianqing wasted no time and immediately rushed to the palace of the God Emperor. The God Emperor's palace was very big, even bigger than the imperial city of an ordinary empire, with a radius of 80 miles. Within the 300-meter-tall palace walls, there were magnificent palaces, exquisite mansions, and towering pagodas. The Fortune Divine Palace was actually a two-storied palace that was 3,000 feet tall. Moreover, the outer walls of the palace were made of divine jade and golden stones, making it look extremely sacred and glorious. In a few hours, the Fortune Divine Palace would open. At this moment, more than 300 imperial guards of the Upper Divine Lord Realm had long been guarding the surroundings of the Divine Palace. The two commanders of the Imperial Guard were both mid-gods. Friends, please pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading, 1. However, the deputy commander stayed in the shadows while the commander, Chengju, stood guard at the entrance. When Ji Tianqing arrived at the Fortune Divine Palace, several dozen imperial guards stood motionless on both sides of the main entrance like statues. Chengju, the commander of the imperial guards, was lecturing the imperial guards about some things they should pay attention to. Upon seeing Ji Tianqing, Chengju paused his lecture and looked at Ji Tianqing with a frown. Puzzled, he asked, Yuan Ji, why are you here? There are still a few hours before the Divine Palace opens. You can only come here after the baptism ceremony is over. At the same time, he sneered in his heart, this hedonistic young master has always been reckless and daring. What kind of person is the Soaring Wind Domain's domain lord to have such a useless son? Ji Tianqing did not mind Chengju's cold face. He smiled and transmitted his voice, Lord Commander, this young master has a request. Let's talk in private. Chengju despised Huang Xiaolong in his heart and was somewhat unwilling. However, he could not offend Yuan Ji in public to avoid forming a grudge with the Soaring Wind Domain's domain lord. He walked to a dark corner expressionlessly and looked at Ji Tianqing with a frown. He asked, Yuan Ji, what do you want? Ji Tianqing stretched out his right hand and opened his palm, showing his identity token to Chengju. I want to enter the Divine Palace now. Nonsense. Chengju scolded sternly and refused without hesitation. His Majesty the God Emperor has decreed that no one can break the rules. Are you asking me to violate the decree? After a pause, he frowned and asked, you actually got the token? That old man Chongzheng. How much did he charge you? That's not important. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and put away the token. He smiled and said, Commander Chengju is loyal and in the prime of his life. He is a pillar of support under the God Emperor. However, I heard that your son is only a middle-level monarch god with mediocre talent. Not to mention taking over your position, it is unknown whether he can break through to the godly king realm in this lifetime. Chengju's face darkened. He asked in a low voice, Yuan Ji, what do you mean? Ji Tianqing smiled and said, nothing. I just want to help your son for Commander Chengju's sake. How about this, I will ask my father to arrange a position for your son in the Soaring Wind Domain for 100 years. After 100 years, I will ask my father to recommend your son to enter the Divine Palace to receive the Divine Light Baptism. At that time, your son will be enlightened and have a chance to break through to the godly king realm. Ji Tianqing said it casually, but Chengju was overjoyed. His heartbeat quickened, and his body trembled with excitement. This was because Ji Tianqing had spoken exactly what he was thinking. Although he was the guard commander, he did not dare to abuse his power and let his mediocre son enter the Fortune Divine Palace. That would be too obvious, and he would be attacked by many god kings. But if the soaring wind domain's domain lord stepped in, it would be different. Not only would he not be criticized, but his son would also have a meteoric rise in his career. This was more precious than tens of billions of resources. Chengju hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and made a decision. He nodded and said, "All right. Then I will thank young Master Yuan first. Wait a moment, I will open the door for you. Young Master Yuan, please keep a low profile and don't be too ostentatious. Otherwise, you will embarrass me." "Yes, I understand." Ji Tianqing nodded with a playful smile. Then, he waited in a dark corner for a moment. Chengju found an excuse to send away all the guards at the Divine Palace. Then, he personally opened the Divine Palace's door and welcomed Ji Tianqing in. Chapter 35-37. With Yuan Ji's memories, Ji Tianqing had some understanding of both Chengju and Chongzheng. Both of them had their own weaknesses. As long as Huang Xiaolong catered to each other's interests, he would be able to solve the problem. Now, only the Fortune Divine Palace's high priest was left to guard the Fortune altar. Ji Tianqing stepped through the Fortune Divine Palace's gates and entered the dimly lit main hall. Soon, Chengju closed the gates of the Divine Palace and called back the Imperial Guards to stand guard outside the gates. Ji Tianqing stood in the middle of the main hall and looked around. The main hall was empty. There were no people or statues in sight. Only in the middle of the hall was an altar that was hundreds of meters tall. It was emitting a colorful divine light. Ji Tianqing leaped onto the altar and stood on top of it. The bottom of the altar was big and small, and the top was a platform with a radius of 10 zhang. The platform was engraved with array formation patterns, and there was a gap in the shape of a token. Without a doubt, this palace was not the real Fortune Divine Palace. Only by passing through this altar could one enter the real Fortune Divine Palace. Ji Tianqing took out his identity token and dived into the gap in the ground. In an instant, more than 1,000 array formation patterns were activated, emitting dazzling divine lights. Surging God force circulated, and soon, a blinding white light gate appeared in front of Ji Tianqing. This was a transmission gate. Ji Tianqing strode into it. A white light flashed, and he disappeared with a swish sound. In the next moment, he entered a quiet and warm space. The night sky was dark in all directions, and only 1,000 zhang radius in front of him was illuminated by colorful lights. The ground under his feet was paved with marble, and the surroundings were empty. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense and scanned the surroundings. He discovered that he was in the main hall of a palace, and it was at least 1,000 zhang in radius. The patterns on the ground and the patterns on the walls exuded an ancient aura. In the middle of the main hall, there was an altar with a radius of 100 zhang. It was a colorful altar made of various kinds of divine stones, precious gems, and divine gold. The altar was like a pyramid. The lower end was circular and had a radius of 1,000 feet. The top was only a little more than 10 feet. At this moment, the altar was not open, but the gems and divine gold on the altar were also shining with 5-colored divine light. Ji Tianqing could vaguely sense that the altar contained an extremely vast and surging energy, and it faintly gave off a vigorous aura of revival and prosperity. Sitting cross-legged at the top of the altar was a white-robed, white-haired old man from the God clan. Upon seeing this, Ji Tianqing thought to himself, this should be the real Fortune Divine Palace. That Fortune altar really does contain Fortune God Force. He then released his divine sense, penetrating through the gloomy palace to check the situation outside. Unexpectedly, the palace was protected by a divine king's divine formation, which isolated all divine power. With Ji Tianqing's current strength, his spiritual consciousness could not penetrate the palace, nor could he see the situation outside. This made it difficult for him to determine where the Fortune Divine Palace was located. Meanwhile, The white-haired old man sitting cross-legged at the top of the altar suddenly sensed a stranger's aura approaching, and he opened his eyes. His face was thin, but his eyes were deep and dignified. His entire body exuded a powerful aura unique to a high-level god-king. His gaze swept across the surrounding darkness like lightning, and immediately locked onto Ji Tianqing, and he frowned. TSK. Which rascal dares to trespass into the Fortune Divine Palace? The white-haired old man was as steady as Mount Tai, sitting on the altar without moving an inch. His sharp gaze was fixed on Ji Tianqing. In an instant, Ji Tianqing felt a majestic pressure bearing down on him, and the god force and blood in his body became chaotic. However, he did not use his god force to resist. Instead, he put on a pained and fearful expression as he cupped his fists and said, "High Priest, please have mercy, you misunderstood." The white-haired old man was the high priest, and he withdrew his invisible pressure upon hearing Huang Xiaolong's words. He scrutinized Ji Tianqing and asked solemnly, "Who are you? Why did you trespass into the Fortune Divine Palace? Don't you know that this is a capital offense?" Ji Tianqing crossed the dark hall and flew to the bottom of the altar. He said to the high priest, "High priest, I am Yuan Ji, and I am one of the candidates to enter the Fortune Divine Palace." Yuan Ji. The high priest frowned, and asked subconsciously, "That good-for-nothing son of the soaring wind domain lord?" Cough cough. Ji Tianqing pretended to cough to cover up his embarrassment. The high priest knew that he had misspoken, so he changed the topic and asked, "Yuan Ji, there are still a few hours before the baptism ceremony begins, why did you come in early?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Of course, I have Chongzheng and Qingju's permission, otherwise, who would be able to barge in?" The high priest frowned, and his face darkened as he said, "So, you bribed them with money?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, "High priest, don't make it sound so bad. That's not a bribe, it's called helping each other. As the saying goes, if it's convenient for others, it's convenient for yourself." Without waiting for him to finish, the high priest snorted disdainfully and said, "Humph. Don't try that with me, a bribe is a bribe. A good-for-nothing like you has always been lawless and reckless. I can pretend that I don't know that Chongzheng and Qingju are in cahoots with you. However, if you want to bribe this old man, then you should give up on that idea." Obviously, the high priest was different from Chongzheng and Qingju. He was already a high-level god-king with high status and power, and he was very old-fashioned and strict. It was impossible to bribe him with money and power. Ji Tianqing was well aware of this, and he was well prepared. He said with a smile, "High priest, I have heard that you have a pure heart and few desires, and you are a fair and honest person. Don't worry, I will never bribe you and tarnish your reputation." Everyone liked to hear compliments and praises. Even if they knew that it was flattery, they would still enjoy it. The high priest's expression eased a lot, and he stroked his beard and said, "It's good that you know. No matter how much money you take out, I will not break the rules, and I will not open the altar for you in advance. Leave obediently and wait for the baptism ceremony to start before you come in again." AI. Ji Tianqing pretended to be worried and sighed, and said with a bitter expression, "High priest, you have misunderstood. I did everything I could to enter the Fortune Divine Palace, not for the baptism, but now that things have come to this, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. In fact, I had no choice but to do this to save Yingying." The high priest was stunned, and he frowned and asked in a low voice, "What Yingying? Yuan Ji, what do you mean?" Ji Tianqing smiled bitterly and said, "High priest, are you still going to play dumb? Even though everyone knows that you've been alone all your life, guarding the Fortune Divine Palace for the God Emperor, and never left the palace, everyone knows that you've never left. In fact, only a few people know that you have a daughter. Her name is Yingying, and she lives in the orchid garden in Yudu. Wonderful Book House." Chapter 35-38. The high priest froze on the spot, and his face darkened. He glared at Ji Tianqing and asked coldly, "Brat, this is my biggest secret, how did you know about it?" Ji Tianqing looked back at him fearlessly and said calmly, "High Priest, others may not understand you, but I do. You're honest and upright, and you've never tried to curry favor with those in power. You're also not willing to form cliques. Therefore, even though you have the strength of a 7th-level God King, you can't be put in an important position. You can only guard the Fortune Divine Palace and never leave. If you're really alone, there's nothing wrong with that. At least no one will disturb you. You won't have to face the filthy and dirty government, and you won't have to pretend to be obedient to the various region masters, generals, and commanders. However, the woman you once loved deeply gave birth to a daughter for you. It was only on her deathbed that she entrusted her daughter to you. Therefore, Ying is the most important person in your life. Unfortunately, you couldn't go against the Emperor's mandate, and could only guard the Fortune Divine Palace. You couldn't take care of her, so you settled her in the Orchid Courtyard and asked your best friend, senior military officer Yan, to take care of her. Ji Tianqing explained the secrets of the High Priest. He understood them very clearly. Even though what he said was true, and it touched the High Priest's heart. However, the High Priest became more vigilant, and his body was filled with rage. He interrupted Huang Xiaolong and shouted, "Shut up! I'm asking you, how did you know about this secret? Also, what are you trying to do? If you dare to harm Ying, I'll kill you even if I have to become enemies with the Fengling region master." Seeing how agitated the High Priest was, Ji Tianqing quickly waved his hand and persuaded, "High Priest, don't be agitated. I haven't finished speaking. There's something you might not know. Your best friend, senior military officer Yan, became a general under my father in order to get promoted. As for me and Ying, didn't she stay in the Yudu Institute for more than 10 years? Coincidentally, I was also in the God Monarch realm during that period of time, and I was also cultivating in the Yudu Institute. Ying and I are friends, very close friends, you know." "What?" The High Priest looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His expression changed drastically, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "You little bastard, how dare you seduce this old man's daughter?" Ji Tianqing's face immediately darkened, and he said angrily, "Old man, do you know how to speak human language? What do you mean I seduced her? At first, we had a pure friendship. Later, Ying was alone and had no one to rely on. I saw that she was weak and pitiful, so I took care of her. In the end, we developed feelings for each other over time. She was infatuated with me and was loyal to me. She even swore to the heavens that she would marry no one else but me." "Bullshit." The High Priest flew into a rage and could no longer maintain his composure. He stood up and pointed at Ji Tianqing as he scolded, "You ignorant and incompetent hedonist, how are you worthy of this old man's daughter? This old man understands Ying's temperament. How could she fall for a silk pants like you?" Ji Tianqing spread his hands and sneered, "High Priest, if Ying knew that you were slandering me like this, she would definitely be very sad. Moreover, other than being her biological father, you have never fulfilled your duty as a father. Do you really understand Ying and care for her? Have you ever accompanied her, even if it was just for a day? Do you really have the qualifications to discipline her and meddle in her life?" Hearing this, the High Priest suddenly froze. His anger was stuck in his chest and he could no longer vent it. Because what Ji Tianqing said was right, he was indeed not a qualified father. At the same time, this was the thing that he blamed himself for the most. It was also a regret that he could not make up for. After a moment of silence, the High Priest suppressed his anger and coldly snorted, "This old man is her father. Who she wants to marry, this old man naturally has to interfere. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "I spent so much effort to find you, not to quarrel with you. I just want to tell you that Ying has been poisoned." "Poisoned?" The High Priest's body trembled and his eyes widened again. He was so nervous that his heart was in his throat. Hasn't she always been in Xianlong court? How could she be poisoned? Was someone trying to murder her? Could it be this old man's enemy? Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "Don't make wild guesses. There are only 2 or 3 people who know that Yingying is your daughter. She wasn't poisoned, but injured by the experts of the sea race. A month ago, she went to the West Sea's Yin ruins to explore the ruins in search of an opportunity to break through to the God King realm. There, she fought with the sea race experts and was severely injured by them. She was even poisoned by a strange poison. At the moment of life and death, she sent me a message and I brought the God King experts to rescue her." The high priest became even more anxious and worried. He asked impatiently, "How is her condition now? Has the strange poison been cured? Doesn't your soaring wine domain chief's manor have many experts and strange people?" Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes and said snappily, "If the strange poison has been cured, why would I come to you? My father is cultivating in seclusion and the deputy domain chief is out on official business. There are only 2 god kings left in the manor and they are not good at medicine. I have thought of many ways and found many people through my connections but they could not cure the strange poison. Now, the strange poison has merged with Yingying's bloodline. Her blood has turned blue and contains a strong poison. Her body is festering and the poison is corroding her flesh and bones. She is suffering from pain and torment at all times." Hearing this, the high priest's heart was bleeding and he was burning with worry. How can this be? Yingying has always been kind and dutiful. How can the heavens let her suffer such pain and torment? Ji Tianqing frowned unhappily and asked, "Yingying's illness is incurable and the poison will soon invade her sea of consciousness. Once her godhead is corroded by the poison, I don't need to tell you what will happen to her, do I? As her father, don't you want to do something for her other than complaining and blaming the heavens?" This old man. The high priest was stumped for words, and a bitter expression appeared on his face as he said, "This old man has a mission to guard the Fortune Divine Palace, and I dare not leave." Pedantic. Ji Tianqing scolded angrily, "Your daughter is about to commit suicide because of the poison, and you're still thinking about some bullshit mission? Are you still human? Are you worthy of being her father? Can't you go against your orders for once and go back to Xianlong courtyard to see her for her sake? Anyway, His Highness God Emperor has not been in Yudu for hundreds of years. Even if you leave for a few hours, no one will know. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if someone knew that you had temporarily left, who would really hold you accountable? Look at Chongzheng and Qingju, they both went against His Highness God Emperor's orders and accepted bribes for hundreds of years. But have they been punished? Who will point out their mistakes? Chapter 35-39. Ji Tianqing's words made the high priest hesitate. He furrowed his brows and remained silent. He was struggling and weighing the pros and cons in his heart. It was true that the generals and experts under the God Emperor's command were all practicing favoritism, taking bribes, and bending the law. The entire Yuda city had long become a dirty vanity fair, a pitch-black vat of dye. Only the high priest was stubborn and pedantic, pretending to be noble and virtuous. He would rather stay in the dark Fortune Divine Palace to protect his reputation and character. But now, the heavens didn't open their eyes and let his daughter suffer such painful torture. He was already a failure and an unqualified father. Was he going to continue to make his daughter bitterly disappointed and be a cold-blooded, pedantic old man? The high priest clenched his fists and struggled in his heart. Ji Tianqing added coldly, "There are still 8 hours before the Fortune Divine Palace opens. You can decide whether you want to go or not. Also, there's something I have to tell you." Divine physician Xue Shen Wang once examined her and said that to completely remove the strange poison in her body, her blood must be drained. However, only her closest kin can replenish half of her divine blood and preserve her life so that she can slowly recuperate. He glanced at the high priest and sneered, although this is the only way to treat Ying, I don't think it's very useful. After all, her closest kin is a stubborn, pedantic old man. This old man is selfish, how can he be willing to give up half of his divine blood? *T. The high priest was enraged. His face was ashen as he shouted, for Ying, this old man can even give up his life. Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes and said, you sound so righteous. Then why are you still standing here? The high priest finally reacted. Ji Tianqing was deliberately provoking him. This news was too sudden, causing his emotions to fluctuate violently. He couldn't keep his mind clear. If it was during normal times, he wouldn't have reacted so slowly. Sure enough, after calming down, a trace of doubt rose in the high priest's heart. Kid, are all the things you said true? How can you prove it? Also, if you want to inform this old man, you can send me a transmission jade slip. Why did you come here personally? Ji Tianqing was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at the high priest and scolded, old man, are you muddle-headed? Have I seen you before? I don't recognize your divine soul aura, and I have never exchanged transmission jade slips with you. How can I send you a message? Moreover, if I didn't come here personally and tell you the truth, would you believe me? It's up to you whether you want to believe it or not. The high priest frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he took out a transmission jade slip and said, no, I can't leave the Fortune Divine Palace so easily. I must send a message to Ying to ask about the situation. As he spoke, he started Ying's scent. A cold glint flashed across Ji Tianqing's eyes as his heart tightened. However, he guessed that Ying shouldn't be able to see the communication jade slip now, so he was slightly relieved. Calm Wai soon, the high priest sent out the transmission jade slip and waited patiently for Ying's reply. Ji Tianqing was calm as usual. He looked at the high priest from the corner of his eyes and sneered, no wonder Ying said you were cold-blooded and heartless. Today, this young master has seen it for himself. She is terminally ill and in so much pain that she wants to die. You sent her a transmission to ask if she was really poisoned. Old man, Ying has 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have a father like you. The high priest was angry and ashamed. His face was red as he glared at Ji Tianqing. After a long time, he finally said something. Little bastard, if Ying marries you in the future, this old man will never agree to it. Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes at him and said in a disdainful tone, who wants to be your son-in-law? If it weren't for Ying, this young master wouldn't care about an old man like you. The high priest was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He clenched his fists so hard that they cracked. He wanted to beat Yuan Ji up. However, he was more worried about Ying's condition. He suppressed his anger and didn't bicker with Yuan Ji. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. The high priest didn't get a reply from Ying and finally couldn't hold back his anxiety. Ji Tianqing added fuel to the fire and said, High priest, don't pretend to be anxious. You're not anxious at all, right? Keep waiting. In another 8 hours, you will be able to activate the creation altar. You have to stay close to it for the next 7 days. Perhaps Ying will reply to you after 7 days. Of course, I hope she's still awake and hasn't fainted. After being mocked by Ji Tianqing, the high priest couldn't hold back anymore and finally made up his mind. Yuan brat, stay here obediently. This old man will go out now. This old man will definitely be back in 8 hours at most. You better behave yourself and don't cause any trouble. Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes again and said snappily, other than the creation altar, there's nothing here. Other than you, no one can open the altar. What kind of trouble can I cause? The high priest thought that Huang Xiaolong's words made sense and ignored him. He waved his hand and sent out several rays of divine light to open the space gate. Whoosh! He hurriedly stepped through the space gate and disappeared into the darkness. In order to fool others, he used a secret technique to conceal himself. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Qingju, who was guarding the gate, and asked him to open the gate. Then, he quietly left the Creation Divine Palace and rushed to the Orchid Courtyard in the southern part of the city. After the high priest left, Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, this old man is really difficult to deal with. From here to the Orchid Courtyard, to seeing Yingying, to learning the truth, and to finding out that he had been deceived, it took him 15 minutes at most. By the time he reacted and hurried back, he still needed some time. In short, I only have 30 minutes at most. I need to hurry. Ji Tianqing analyzed inwardly with a solemn expression. He immediately flew to the top of the altar, no longer disguising himself or suppressing his cultivation realm. He used the secret technique to observe the creation altar with all his might. In his golden eyes, the altar made of 5-colored divine stones and golden jade suddenly appeared with billions of formation veins. In a short 10 breaths' time, he saw the structure of the altar. It contained 5 supreme grade king grade divine arrays. Most importantly, the legendary peerless divine pearl was inside the altar. It was a 7-colored crystal bead the size of a walnut. It was like a small sun, shining with dazzling divine light. It emitted an endless amount of fortune god force, which was absorbed and stored by the creation altar. When the altar opened, boundless creation divine light would appear, illuminating the hall within 1,000 zhang radius. At that time, when the god force was condensed to the limit, it would produce the creation rain. Any living being that bathed in the creation divine light and creation rain would have their talent and intelligence greatly improved. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3540. In a short span of 20 breaths, Ji Tianqing found the fastest way to retrieve the divine bead. He had to go around 2 divine formations and crack 3 divine formations to obtain the divine bead. Of course, only a former peak divine king like him with extraordinary attainments in the formation path could go around 2 supreme grade king level divine formations. If it were any other divine king, they wouldn't be able to avoid them and would have to crack 5 divine formations. Furthermore, supreme grade king level divine formations couldn't be cracked by a divine king. Although I can avoid 2 divine formations, it's impossible to crack 3 supreme grade king level divine formations in 30 minutes. I have to think of a way to stall for time and not let the high priest return too quickly. Ji Tianqing observed and deduced the way to crack the divine formations while thinking of a way to stall for time. The high priest was on his way to Xianlong Court, so he didn't have time to think. He could only think of a simpler way in a hurry. Therefore, he took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message to the Calm Peace Divine King. Calm Peace Divine King was a general under Fengling Region Master. He was ordered to protect Yuan Ji when he came to Yudu. In the communication jade scroll, Ji Tianqing gave the order to Calm Peace Divine King. God King Calm Peace, take 30 guards with you and head to Xinlan Courtyard to protect her. In a moment, a white-haired old man would rush into Xianlong Court. Just say that you are under my orders to protect Miss Yingying and that no one else is allowed to enter. You have to stall for time as much as possible, but don't get into a conflict with him because he is Miss Yingying's father. Also, this matter must be kept a secret and not a single word can be leaked. Ji Tianqing's words were very serious. Calm Peace Divine King was also a retainer of Fengling Region Master and had always been loyal. Ji Tianqing believed that after Calm Peace Divine King received the order, he would rush to carry it out as quickly as possible. However, this wasn't enough. He took out another communication jade scroll and sent a message to another rich young master. Brother Mu Bai, I can redeem the 3 king-level divine weapons that I lost to you in a bet tonight. Go to Xianlong Court now. My father-in-law is there. You can ask him for it. Of course, you have to rush there within a quarter of an hour. If you're late, there won't be any left. After sending out this message, the corners of Ji Tianqing's mouth curled up into a sneer as he muttered, with these two obstacles, I should be able to delay them for an hour, right? However, it was still unrealistic to break 3 king-grade divine arrays within an hour. But at least there was more hope. After that, Ji Tianxing cast aside all distracting thoughts and focused on observing the creation altar, trying to deduce a way to break the formation. At the same time, 2 groups of people were rushing towards Xianlong court. On one side was the high priest. He was anxious and worried about Yingying's safety. However, he was still bound by the emperor's mandate and could not leave the Fortune Divine Palace. Therefore, he was very low-key and cautious when he moved, afraid that he would be recognized by others. As a result, he did not dare to fly openly. He could only pass through the dark alleys like a black shadow and slowly approach Xianlong court. The other group of people was the Calm Peace Divine King and 30 guards. After receiving Yuan Ji's order, they did not dare to delay and rushed to Xianlong court as fast as lightning. Fortunately, they managed to reach Xianlong court in a quarter of an hour. Then, the 30 guards spread out and stood guard outside Xianlong court. The Calm Peace Divine King was clad in armor and wielding a sword as he personally guarded the entrance. Xianlong court was originally a quiet residence in the midst of chaos. Usually, the door was tightly shut and no one came in or out. In the entire residence, there were only 4 guards, 4 maids, and 2 female servants. In the past month, Yingying had been cultivating in seclusion. The residence's door was tightly shut and had never been opened. Therefore, there was no one guarding the door at night and the guards did not need to patrol. Just as the Calm Peace Divine King and the 30 guards got into position, they saw a figure rapidly approaching from the end of the dark street. It was a white-haired old man with bright eyes and an anxious expression. He was rushing towards Xianlong court at lightning speed. He's here. The Calm Peace Divine King thought to himself. His right hand gripped the hilt of his sword as he stared sharply at the white-haired old man. He was on guard. The high priest, who had rushed over, was clearly stunned when he saw the Calm Peace Divine King and the guards at the entrance. He stopped in his tracks and frowned in confusion as he sized up the Calm Peace Divine King and the guards. At this moment, he almost thought that he had gone the wrong way. He looked up at the lintel of the entrance and saw that the words Xianlong court were indeed written on the plaque. Only then did he walk towards the entrance. Clang! Seeing the high priest approach, the Calm Peace Divine King unsheathed his sword without hesitation. He stared sharply at the high priest and shouted coldly, "This is a private residence and no one is allowed to enter. Please leave." The high priest frowned and shouted angrily, "Of course I know this is a private residence. Who are you? Who ordered you to guard here?" Although the Calm Peace Divine King was a 4th-degree realm middle-level divine king, he was not afraid of the high priest's authority. He said expressionlessly, "We were ordered to guard here to protect a very important person. You have been sneaking around and even tried to gather information. Do you dare to say that you are not someone with evil intentions? Tell us the truth or don't blame us for taking you down and interrogating you." Someone with evil intentions? The high priest was so angry that he almost laughed. He rebuked angrily, "I am the owner of this Xianlong court. Now that I want to go home, how is it someone with evil intentions? Who asked you to guard this place? Why don't I know?" The Calm Peace Divine King maintained his cold demeanor and said expressionlessly, "You have no right to know who we are under. Moreover, the owner of this residence is Commandant Yan. You old liar, can you think before you make up lies?" The high priest was so angry that he stomped his feet. He wished he could slap the Calm Peace Divine King to death. He was in a hurry to enter the courtyard to see Yingying, but the guards at the entrance made things difficult for him. What the hell was going on? No, I have to stay calm and not waste any time. With that thought, the high priest suppressed his anger and explained patiently, "I am Commandant Yan's friend. I have an urgent matter to look for him. Get out of the way." Unexpectedly, the calm peace divine king's expression became even more contemptuous. He blocked in front of him and sneered, "You just said that you are the owner of Xian Lan Court and now you say that you are Commandant Yan's friend. Moreover, Commandant Yan is clearly in Soaring Wind region and not here. Old man, you are full of lies and full of loopholes. You must be up to no good." The high priest was completely speechless. At this moment, he really wanted to throw caution to the wind and knock the calm peace divine king and the guards unconscious. However, logic told him that he could not do so. Because someone who could order a middle-level divine king to guard the door was definitely a top-notch expert. Moreover, the other party was under orders to protect Ying, so the high priest had no reason to attack. He nodded and said, "So it's him. Sure enough, I didn't misjudge him. He's a guy with a cold face but a warm heart." Although he said some unpleasant words, he was actually most concerned about Ying. It must have been hard on him to put in so much effort for Ying. At this moment, the high priestess was moved. However, he always remembered that business was more important and time was of the essence. Therefore, he explained to calm peace divine king, "Tonight, Yuan Ji personally informed me. Only then did I know that Ying was terminally ill, so I hurried back to visit her. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, you should let us pass now, right?" The calm peace divine king frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Senior, although I can understand your anxious feelings, this is against the rules. We cannot act on our own. Please wait for a moment, I have to send a message to the eldest young master." With that, he took out a communication jade slip and calmly sent a message. The high priest was about to explode from anxiety. However, the previous hour was already delayed, so he was in no hurry. He could only nod his head to express his understanding. After the calm peace divine king sent a message to Yuan Ji, everyone waited patiently. After a full 7 minutes, Yuan Ji sent a message back, confirming the high priest's identity and allowing them to pass. After reading the jade slip, the calm peace divine king revealed a warm smile to the high priest. He cupped his fists and said, "Senior, the eldest young master has already confirmed this matter with me. We misunderstood you before and caused some unpleasantness. Please be magnanimous and forgive us for our transgressions. Since you have returned, our mission has been completed. We will take our leave now." All right. Don't waste time." The high priest did not fall for his tricks and hurriedly waved his hand to interrupt him. The calm peace divine king did not stop him and hurriedly retreated to the side with a few guards. The high priest impatiently cast a spell and activated the sealing array on the door. Soon, the door opened. Creak, after the heavy door opened, the high priest hurriedly stepped over the door and quickly walked into the courtyard. The calm peace divine king gave a look to the guards, and everyone hurriedly retreated into the darkness and quietly left. But at this moment, a dazzling 5-colored divine light sped over from the end of the street. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the 5-colored divine light arrived at the entrance of Xian Lan Court. The divine light dissipated, revealing a nobleman youth dressed in a brocade robe. This person was panting, and it was obvious that he had rushed over at his fastest speed. He looked around and his gaze gathered on the high priest. He hurriedly waved his hand and shouted, "Senior, please wait." The high priest stopped in his tracks and turned to look at the nobleman with a puzzled expression. "Who are you? What's the matter?" The nobleman sized up the high priest and thought to himself, "Age, appearance, and attire are all the same as Yuan Ji said. It should be him." Thus, he hurriedly flew in front of the high priest and bowed. "Senior, I am Jun Mubai, Yuan Ji's good brother." "Why is it Yuan Ji again?" The high priest furrowed his brows and asked unhappily, "I don't know you. Why are you looking for me?" The smile on Jun Mubai's face froze, and he muttered to himself, "This old man looks very impatient. It seems like he already knows why I'm here. Humph. You're a high-level divine king, but you can't even bear to part with a few king-level divine artifacts. How stingy. Jun Mubai cursed in his heart, but he still smiled and explained patiently, Senior, you're wrong. Although you don't know me, I know you. You're Yuanji's father-in-law, right? The high priest's face twitched, and he inexplicably wanted to beat Yuanji up. However, he could neither admit nor deny this kind of thing. Therefore, he could only reply vaguely, Jun Mubai smiled and rubbed his hands. He said expectantly, you should have prepared the 3 king-level divine artifacts, right? What? 3 king-level divine artifacts? The high priest furrowed his brows, confused. What do you mean? Jun Mubai was speechless. He thought to himself, this old man is not going to go back on his word, is he? Chapter 35-42. Senior, there are some things that we both know. Please don't make things difficult for me, okay? Jun Mubai smiled and lowered his posture as he spoke to the high priest. However, in his heart, he had already cursed the high priest's 8 generations of ancestors. Damn it! The one who owes money becomes the boss, and the one who wants money has to pretend to be a grandson. What kind of world is this? The high priest was even more puzzled. He was shrouded in fog. What? How am I making things difficult for you? And those 3 king-level divine artifacts, what is the meaning of that? Explain it clearly to this old man. The high priest was also angry. He glared at Jun Mubai with a black face and asked angrily, why do I have to prepare 3 king-level divine artifacts? Jun Mubai could only answer truthfully. Previously, young Master Yuan made a bet with me. The bet was 3 king-level divine artifacts, and he lost. However, it has been half a year, and he has not fulfilled his promise. He said that his father-in-law is a high-level divine king, a famous divine craftsman, generous, heroic, and wealthy. Seeing the high priest's black face, Jun Mubai flattered him against his will. Unexpectedly, before he could finish, the high priest interrupted him, and his face turned even darker. He. So, since Yuanji didn't fulfill your bet, you came to me for it? Jun Mubai was stunned for a moment and nodded. Although this statement is not quite correct, that is indeed what I mean. Scram! The high priest scolded mercilessly. His white beard and eyebrows flew up. Jun Mubai shrunk his neck and had an awkward expression. He smiled bitterly and said, Senior, if you don't want to fulfill your promise, just say so. Why do you have to say such evil words? You are young Master Yuan's father-in-law, so you have to watch your words and actions. I am also the second young master of the Jun family, a top noble family in Yudu. You have to think twice before you act. The high priest was so angry that his entire body trembled. His hands trembled as he pointed at Jun Mubai and scolded, think thrice your mother. That good-for-nothing Yuanji, that bastard, what kind of friends does he have? If he owes you something, you should ask him for it. What right do you have to look for this old man? Jun Mubai was also angered by the scolding. He straightened his neck and shouted angrily, Old man, you didn't pay back your debt and you still dare to scold me? Yuanji must be blind. Why did he choose such an old man as his father-in-law? I don't need those 3 king-grade divine artifacts. However, you must apologize to this young master right now. Jun Mubai put his hands on his hips and glared at the high priest. The high priest was so angry that he laughed again. He sneered and said, You really don't know what you're talking about. Brat, you're not welcome here. I still have matters to attend to, so leave quickly. This is between you and Yuanji. It has nothing to do with me. See him out. In the blink of an eye, almost 2 hours had passed. The high priest's patience ran out. He waved his sleeves and used his divine power to wrap around Jun Mubai and send him to the door. Of course, no matter how anxious he was, he did not lose his rationality. He knew that the power of the Jun family was similar to that of the Fengling region's domain lord. They were also nobles that could not be provoked. Therefore, he only sent Jun Mubai out of the door without harming him in the slightest. Hey! Old man, you must give this young master a reasonable explanation and apologize for your malicious words. After Jun Mubai landed, he rushed to the door again. Unexpectedly, the high priest waved his hand and shot out a golden light to close the door. Bang, 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 Jun Mubai slammed the door and angrily demanded an apology from the high priest. However, the high priest turned a deaf ear to him and quickly left the courtyard. He entered the second courtyard. Ying had always been staying in the second courtyard. The environment of this courtyard was the most elegant. The main room was set up with a divine array, and there was a meticulously built secret room underground for Ying to cultivate in seclusion. As soon as the high priest entered the second courtyard, he was greeted by two guards in silver armor. Obviously, the two guards had been meditating in the room. They had heard the noise in the front courtyard and hurriedly got up to check the situation. However, they had not even walked out of the second courtyard when they met the high priest. They recognized the high priest, but they did not know the relationship between the high priest and Ying. Seeing that the high priest had arrived, the two of them hurriedly went up and bowed. Your subordinates greet the high priest. After the greeting, one of the guards said, High priest, Commandant Yen is temporarily not here. He is on a mission in the Soaring Wind region and only comes back once every 6 months. The high priest hurriedly waved his hand and said in a dignified tone, Of course I know. I'm not looking for Commandant Yen. I'm looking for Miss Ying. The two guards were stunned. Ah! High priest, Miss Ying is in seclusion. It's not good to disturb her, the high priest said with a gloomy expression, this is a matter of life and death. It can't be delayed any longer. I must see her. Move aside. The two guards hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. All right, high priest, please follow me. The two led the high priest into the hall and came in front of a secret door. Wait here. I'll go in alone. The high priest instructed and cast a spell to open the secret door. He stepped in alone. After passing through a dark tunnel, he quickly entered the underground and came to the door of the secret room. The door of the secret room was tightly shut and sealed by a divine array. The surroundings were deathly silent and emitted a faint chill. The high priest's heart tightened. He thought to himself, there's no movement at all. Could Ying have fainted? No, I can't knock. I have to wait for her to open the door. Therefore, he hurriedly used a mystic technique and forcefully broke the array of the secret room's stone door. After the divine array was broken, the high priest forcefully opened the door of the secret room. He quickly stepped into the dark secret room and saw that the secret room was flashing with an icy blue light. There was a bone-piercing chill. Ying. Father is back. Wake up. The high priest looked around for Ying's figure and called out in a gentle and kind tone. However, there was a gourd-shaped ice sculpture in the middle of the secret room. It suddenly cracked and a large amount of ice shards fell. Then, a young woman in a long brocade dress appeared in the broken ice sculpture. Her face was not too beautiful, but it was pretty and ugly. At this moment, she was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the divine array and focused on cultivating a mystic technique. The high priest forcefully broke open the door of the secret room and shouted in a panic. Immediately, her mind was disturbed, and her blood flowed in reverse. When the ice sculpture shattered, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her divine soul and divine power were in a mess. Seeing this, the high priest's face changed drastically. His heart was in his throat. Ying. You're really poisoned. It's already so serious. The high priest exclaimed and rushed to the front of the ice sculpture. He formed a seal with both hands and sent a vast amount of divine power into Yingying's body to help her suppress the poison. Yingying's mind and blood were already in a mess. With the vast amount of divine power entering her body, she could not take it. She spat out another mouthful of blood and fainted. Chapter 35-43. Yingying. Seeing that Yingying had fainted, the high priest's heart was in a mess, and he subconsciously cried out in grief. He quickly withdrew his majestic god force and released his divine sense to check on Yingying's injuries. The sea tribe's poison has indeed seeped into her bloodline. Is it so serious now? With this thought in mind, the high priest was extremely worried. However, when his divine sense entered Yingying's body and carefully checked, he was dumbfounded. Yingying's bloodline was normal, and there were no signs of poisoning. Moreover, with the high priest's rich cultivation experience, he could immediately tell that Yingying did not faint because of poison. She was in seclusion, and her mind and blood were in a mess, causing her to suffer from qi deviation. This result dumbfounded the high priest, and he stood there in a daze. How could this be? Yingying wasn't poisoned at all. She was just in seclusion. It's me. I disturbed her cultivation and caused her to suffer from qi deviation, causing her to faint on the spot. Yuan Ji, that bastard, did this to me. When the high priest regained his senses, he was so angry that he almost went berserk. His body emitted towering flames of fury, and his body was filled with dense killing intent. Even his eyes had turned blood red. Although he did not understand why Yuan Ji would lie to him and painstakingly fabricate such a lie. But he had a premonition that Yuan Ji must have some unspeakable conspiracy. At this moment, the high priest subconsciously wanted to turn around and rush back to the Fortune Divine Palace to confront Yuan Ji. But this thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately suppressed this impulse. No matter what, nothing was more important than Yingying's safety. Although she was not poisoned, she had suffered from qi deviation. If she was not treated in time, the consequences would be irreversible. In the best-case scenario, her divine Tao foundation would be destroyed, and her godhead would be damaged, turning her into a weak mortal. In the worst-case scenario, her consciousness would be destroyed, and even if she survived, she would become mentally retarded. Therefore, the high priest abandoned all distracting thoughts and put Yuan Ji aside, and used all his strength to treat Yingying. He was indeed a seventh heaven realm high-level god king. In just 100 breaths' time, he had suppressed Yingying's injuries. Then, he patiently used his god force to help Yingying tidy up the chaotic qi and god force in her body. 15 minutes later, Yingying's condition stabilized and she was out of danger. The high priest guarded her and observed her condition at all times to prevent her injuries from worsening. About half an hour later, Yingying slowly woke up. She slowly opened her eyes and was in a daze for a moment before she saw the high priest in front of her. Immediately, she frowned and angrily scolded with a cold expression, "What the hell are you doing? Why did you barge into the secret chamber for no reason and disturb my closed-door cultivation? Are you trying to kill me?" Yingying didn't have a good relationship with the high priest, so she always had a grudge against him. In all these years, the number of times the father and daughter had met could be counted on one's fingers, let alone any deep feelings. The high priest looked ashamed and quickly explained, "Yingying, I didn't do it on purpose. I was also tricked by that bastard Yuan Ji. He lied and said that you were poisoned by the sea race's poison and that your life was at stake. He asked me to come and see you one last time. That's why I hurried back." Yingying was stunned for a moment before she sneered with disdain. "You are a high-level divine king after all. How could Yuan Ji, that ignorant and useless good-for-nothing, fool you? I have never left Yudu, so how could I have been poisoned by the sea race? Originally, I had been in closed-door cultivation for 3 years and was trying to break through the shackles of the divine king realm. You, on the other hand, barged in recklessly and caused all my efforts to go to waste. You even almost lost my life. Sometimes, I wonder if you are really my father. The high priest was at a loss for words and didn't know how to comfort Ying. Thus, he could only change the topic. Ying, what is your relationship with Yuan Ji? Did you know each other at the Yudu Academy? Ying frowned and said with disdain, what relationship can I have with him? He is a well-known good-for-nothing in Yudu, and his family background is top-notch. I am just a nobody. We did stay at the Yudu Academy, but we were just acquaintances. There is no relationship between us. Those girls around him, which one of them isn't a daughter of a rich and powerful family? What? Do you want to betroth me to him? Absolutely not. No matter how prominent his family background is, it can't change the fact that he is ignorant and incompetent. The high priest was even more furious. He gritted his teeth and sneered, Yuan Ji, you ignorant bastard, how dare you deceive me? After he finished speaking, he turned to leave and rushed back to the Fortune Divine Palace to settle the score with Yuan Ji. Ying, rest in peace and recuperate. Father has something important to deal with now. The high priest finally understood that Yuan Ji had not only deceived him, but also purposely sent guards to find Jun Mubai to stall for time. Yuan Ji must have an ulterior motive, and it was most likely related to the creation altar. When he thought of this, the high priest wished he could grow wings and fly back to the Fortune Divine Palace immediately. He had a bad feeling that something big was going to happen tonight. However, just as he was about to turn and leave, Ying pulled him back. Father! I just woke up, and you are in a hurry to leave. Could it be that in your eyes, my life and safety are not as important as your mission? If Yuan Ji hadn't deceived you, I don't know how many years I would have to wait before I could see you again. Ying pulled on her father's sleeve with a miserable expression, and tears welled up in her eyes as she screamed. Her words came from the bottom of her heart, and her voice was full of emotion. Anyone who heard it would be sad and shed tears. The high priest stopped in his tracks, and his heart softened. After all, this was his biological daughter, his only family member in the world. Even if he had something important to deal with, he should spend more time with his daughter. As for settling the score with Yuan Ji, it didn't matter if it was a little later. After all, Yuan Ji was inside the Fortune Divine Palace, and he couldn't escape. Therefore, the high priest could only stay, and said gently, Ying, father knows you are upset, so father can stay with you for a while. However, the baptism ceremony will begin in 4 hours. At that time, father must return to the Fortune Divine Palace no matter what. If father is not present, there will be no one to open the creation altar, and something big will happen. Ying was someone who understood the gravity of the situation, so she nodded and said, Father, don't worry, for hours at most, I won't delay your business. The high priest sighed in relief, and a kind smile appeared on his face as he started to chat with Ying. The father and daughter had not seen each other for more than 30 years. During this time, Ying had experienced many things, and she had experienced many ups and downs, but she had no one to talk to. Now that her father was back, and he was willing to listen to her, she was naturally happy to talk. The father and daughter chatted openly, and their relationship improved a lot. They didn't even realize that time had passed and the sky was about to brighten. Sword piercing the 9 heavens, sword piercing the 9 heavens. Chapter 35-44. Inside the Fortune Divine Palace. 6 hours had passed. In another 2 hours, the baptism ceremony would begin. Then, more than 100 elites and geniuses would enter the Fortune Divine Palace. Ji Tianqing was still focused on deciphering the divine arrays. He was so focused that he almost forgot about everything else. In a short period of time, his concentration and energy were rapidly depleting, causing his face to turn pale and his forehead to be covered in sweat. Although he had successfully bypassed 2 divine arrays, he had only deciphered 1 supreme-grade divine array. However, this was already the fastest he could go. He was trying his best to decipher the second divine array. Both of his hands were forming divine seals, sending out dazzling divine lights, forming complex seals, and injecting them into the fortune altar. The speed at which his hands were casting spells was too fast, dazzling everyone's eyes, leaving behind a series of afterimages. Even so, he still needed more than an hour to decipher the second divine array. No matter how he looked at it, he would not be able to decipher the third divine array before the baptism ceremony began, and he would not be able to obtain the fortune divine bead. Thinking of this, Huang Xiaolong was incomparably anxious. He calculated silently, 6 hours have passed, but the high priest still hasn't returned. Looks like my plan succeeded. The calm peace divine king and Jun Mubai have successfully delayed the high priest. But no matter how much time they delay, the high priest will definitely return before the baptism ceremony begins. Could it be that I'm just going to look at the fortune divine bead like this and miss out on it? No. Absolutely not. Even if I have to use force to kill the high priest, I must obtain this fortune divine bead. It is Yao Yao's only hope of breaking through to the God-King realm. Ji Tianqing's determination was firm, and his attitude was resolute. Soon, another hour had passed. The high priest still had not returned, and Ji Tianqing was the only one around the fortune altar. He had finally deciphered the second supreme grade king grade divine array. Now, there was only one divine array between him and the fortune divine bead. But he would need at least 3 hours to decipher that divine array. Damn it, there's not enough time. The baptism ceremony would begin in another hour, and there would be countless experts guarding the fortune divine palace. Outside the divine palace, there were at least 100,000 gods watching the ceremony. Close to 100 elites and geniuses would be gathered here after receiving their identity badges. Don't tell me that I have to forcefully break the last divine formation in front of the high priest and nearly 100 people. Ji Tianqing frowned. His heart was burning with worry, but there was nothing he could do. At this moment, he really regretted not taking action earlier. If he had entered the Fortune Divine Palace 4 hours earlier, he would have obtained the Fortune Divine bead by now. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world, and time could not be reversed. Forget it. No matter what the result is, let's just give it a try. There will be a way when the car comes to the mountain, and the boat will cross the bridge when it comes to it. With that in mind, Ji Tianqing continued to cast spells to break the last divine array. However, at this moment, Yun Yao's voice suddenly rang in his mind. Tianqing, do you need my help? Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, then he replied via divine sense, I've already checked. The fortune divine bead is inside the sacrificial altar. However, this sacrificial altar has 5 top-grade king-grade divine formations. I've already bypassed 2 of them, so I need to break the remaining 3. Now, I've already broken 2 divine formations, and there's only 1 left. Unfortunately, there's not enough time left. There's less than an hour left. He briefly explained the current situation to Yun Yao. After listening to his explanation, Yun Yao immediately asked him to open the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. Swoosh! A white light flashed, and Yun Yao appeared above the Fortune Divine altar. She looked at the splendid sacrificial altar beneath her feet, and her eyes shone brightly. She nodded repeatedly and said, That's right, it's really the Fortune Divine bead. It's in the depths of the sacrificial altar. Tianqing, the Fortune Divine bead is so close to me, and I can sense and resonate strongly with it. I can feel that it's sentient. It's complaining and whining to me. It wants to struggle and break free from the sacrificial altar's shackles. Hearing her words, Ji Tianqing's eyes shone brightly. He said in surprise, This Fortune Divine bead actually has sentience and emotions. It seems like it's the most mysterious and the most powerful among the 7 divine beads. Yun Yao didn't reply. She remained silent and focused on sensing the Fortune Divine bead. After a while, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Ji Tianqing. Her eyes sparkled, and she asked in a serious tone, "Tianqing, you said that there's still an hour left, and you won't be able to break the last divine formation in time. If I control the fortune divine bead and let it attack the divine formation with all its might, working with you from the inside, are you confident that you can break it within an hour?" "What?" Ji Tianqing was even more surprised. He asked in disbelief, "You can control the fortune divine bead? That's unbelievable. It's a top-grade king-grade divine object. Theoretically, it's the same grade as that divine formation. But in reality, it's even more powerful than that divine formation. If it attacks the divine formation from the inside, I'm confident that I can break it within an hour." Yunyao didn't hesitate. She nodded decisively and said, "All right, then let's not delay any longer. Let's start now." Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate anymore. He quickly focused his mind and focused on breaking the divine formation with all his might. Inside the divine formation, the dazzling fortune divine bead was already connected to Yunyao's mind. Under the control of Yunyao's mind, it was no longer silent. It became abnormally active. It released a vast and mighty divine power that charged left and right inside the divine formation. It fiercely attacked the nodes and foundation of the divine formation. Previously, the reason why Ji Tianqing couldn't break the divine formation fast was mainly because the internal structure of the divine formation was complicated. Moreover, his divine power wasn't strong enough. He often needed to spend several times more time to break a certain formation. But now, Yunyao was controlling the fortune divine bead to cooperate with him. This was the speed at which he broke the divine formation. It was several times faster and easier. The originally complicated divine formation was broken by him like a hot knife through butter. He advanced triumphantly all the way. As time passed, more and more of the formation's veins were destroyed by Ji Tianqing. The power of the divine formation kept weakening. It flickered with five-colored divine light, and its divine power fluctuated violently. It seemed that Ji Tianqing only needed to break 4 more nodes before he would be able to break through the divine formation and create an opening. However, there were only a few minutes left before the baptism ceremony began. Swoosh! In the gloomy hall, a white light suddenly lit up, and a figure appeared. It was a white-haired old man. He was in a hurry. His face was gloomy, and his whole body was filled with terrifying anger. He was the high priest who had hurried back. As soon as he returned to the divine palace, he saw Ji Tianqing at the top of the creation altar and Yunyao beside him. The high priest was startled. He immediately shouted angrily, "Yuan Ji! You bastard, what are you doing? And the woman beside you, who is she? Who let her in?" Chapter 35-45 *T, I'm still a little late. This old man came back just in time. The sudden appearance of the high priest made Ji Tianqing realize that something was wrong. However, the divine array was about to be broken. He couldn't give up halfway. Therefore, he pretended not to hear the high priest's shout and sped up to break the last 4 nodes of the array. Yunyao was also focused. She controlled the creation divine pearl and attacked the 4 nodes with all her might. Being ignored, the high priest became angrier and angrier. He flew to the creation altar angrily and shouted, "Yuan Ji! What the hell are you doing? Ying is safe and sound, and you have nothing to do with her. Why did you lie to me, saying that she was poisoned and that you have deep feelings for her? What do you want to do by sending me away for a few hours? Do you know that you have committed a serious crime? Even your father can't save you." The high priest frowned and stared at Ji Tianqing and Yunyao as he shouted angrily. Seeing that the 2 of them were focused and pale, and were using some kind of secret technique, the high priest felt that something was wrong. He carefully examined the creation altar and found that the 5-colored divine light on the altar had become very weak. However, the creation divine power inside the altar was abnormally active and violent, like a volcano erupting. The high priest seemed to have guessed something and his eyes widened in disbelief. He glared at Ji Tianqing and roared angrily, "Yuan Ji! You rebellious maniac, how dare you? How dare you destroy the creation altar and steal the supreme divine pearl? Are you crazy? That is the altar built by the God Emperor himself. You will bring disaster to your family by doing this." At this moment, the high priest was completely stunned by Ji Tianqing's craziness. No matter how shrewd and wise he was, he couldn't figure out why Yuan Ji would do this. He was simply blinded by greed. He ignored the dignity of the God Emperor and paid with the lives of Feng Ling's entire family. The enraged high priest was about to make a move to stop Ji Tianqing from casting the spell. As Ji Tianqing cast a spell to break the last 2 nodes, he said to the high priestess, "High priestess, don't worry. I'm not crazy. I'll explain it to you later." "Explain my ass." The high priest roared angrily. He immediately raised his hand and was about to stop Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to take the risk. He shouted angrily, "Stop! Do you know who I am? Do you know what I'm doing? This king carries a shocking secret and shoulders the mission of His Majesty the God Emperor. Don't make a mistake." The high priestess was stunned by his roar. His raised palm also froze in midair. He looked at Yuan Ji in shock. He frowned and asked subconsciously, "What do you mean? Are you not Yuan Ji? You're clearly trying to destroy the creation altar and seize the supreme divine pearl. How could this be the mission given to you by His Majesty the God Emperor? Little b****, what the hell are you doing?" The high priest didn't believe Yuan Ji's nonsense. However, his rationality told him that with Yuan Ji's status, as long as he wasn't crazy, he definitely wouldn't do such a thing. Could it be that there were really some secrets and twists? For a moment, the high priest couldn't make up his mind. He had no choice. It was the first time he had encountered such a thing. Moreover, this matter was too abnormal and illogical. Ji Tianqing's roar was full of righteousness, and his tone was full of dignity. The high priest was confused on the spot. He couldn't tell the truth at all. While he was in a daze, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao sped up and finally broke the last 2 nodes of the array. Suddenly, a gap appeared in the 3rd divine array. Endless divine power of creation burst out from the gap like a volcanic eruption. Swoosh! In an instant, an overwhelming 7-colored divine light filled the entire hall and lit up an area of 1,000 feet. The translucent creation divine bead was like a tired bird returning to its nest. It passed through the gap in the divine formation and flew towards Yun Yao at lightning speed. Swish! The divine pearl flew in front of her, and without stopping, it drilled into her glabella and disappeared. Yun Yao's expression changed immediately. Her eyes were filled with joy. She turned to Ji Tianqing and gave him a look. The two of them had a tacit understanding. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what she meant. Now that she had the creation divine pearl, her shackles were instantly loosened. She could break through to the divine king realm immediately. Therefore, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a beam of white light, putting Yun Yao into the Jiutian 10 Absolutes pagoda. Yun Yao returned to the distorted space and immediately went into seclusion to break through without delay. At this moment, Ji Tianqing stopped and turned around to look at the Grand Priest. "Alright, time's up. The mission is over." He dusted his sleeves and said with a smile. The high priest glared at Huang Xiaolong and pointed a finger at Huang Xiaolong as he bellowed, You traitor. You really let that woman take away the fortune divine bead. Don't deny it. You were trying to destroy the creation altar to steal the creation divine pearl. Ji Tianqing didn't deny it. He nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, you're right. That's true. However, this altar is sealed by 5 Supreme King grade divine arrays. How could I destroy it with my first realm of the King God realm cultivation base? Eh. The Grand Priest was stunned. He frowned and mumbled, "That's right. The altar is protected by 5 supreme divine arrays. Only I know how to open them. It's because of this that I wasn't worried at all when I left by myself and left him here." But how did he do it? While the Grand Priest was frowning and pondering, Ji Tianqing secretly cast a spell and shot out a few rays of divine light. Instantly, a blazing white space gate appeared in front of him. He stepped into the space gate and was about to leave the palace. However, before he left, he turned around to look at the Grand Priest and sneered, "I'm Yuan Ji. Everyone knows that I'm a good-for-nothing. I definitely don't have the strength to destroy the creation altar. Only you, the Grand Priest, know the creation altar best. You can destroy it and steal the creation divine pearl. You're the one who stole the creation altar. The baptism ceremony is about to end. You'd better think about how to explain it to everyone." After that, Ji Tianqing stepped into the space gate and disappeared. The High Priest was stunned on the spot. He stared at the space gate with his mouth agape and cried out, "This is impossible. I've only used the secret technique to leave the palace once in front of him. How is it possible for him to learn it completely and execute it successfully?" After the shock, he remembered what Ji Tianqing had said. He was so angry that his face turned pale. "You can't destroy the altar. I stole the creation altar. Ah! Ah! Yuan Ji. You shameless bastard, you bastard. You and I can't exist under the same sky." The High Priest finally understood that this whole thing had been a conspiracy from beginning to end. Yuan Ji was cunning and cunning. He had schemed against him too ruthlessly. Chapter 35-46. When the High Priest regained his senses, he finally realized the seriousness of the matter. At the same time, he had great doubts about Yuan Ji's identity. That bastard kid, is he really Yuan Ji? How could an ignorant and incompetent good-for-nothing be so scheming and scheming? And his strength, he just broke through to the God King realm. How could he destroy the creation altar and break the supreme grade king grade divine array? Not to mention that no one would believe the news, even the High Priest himself didn't believe it. Because of this, he was even more flustered. He couldn't take the blame for this. The moment Ji Tianqing left the creation divine palace, the High Priest executed a space technique and chased after him without hesitation. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, the High Priest appeared in the brightly lit main hall. This fortune divine palace located in the middle of the Emperor Palace was, in fact, a fake. It was merely a decoy. The real creation divine palace that he and Ji Tianqing were in was actually tens of thousands of miles underground. At this time, the baptism ceremony had just ended. The High Priest could clearly hear the clamor outside the creation divine palace. He looked around for Yuan Ji, but he couldn't find him. Just as he was about to step out of the creation divine palace, he saw hundreds of elites and geniuses walking towards him with joy and anticipation. Chengju, the commander of the Imperial Guards, and dozens of other Imperial Guards stood majestically at the entrance. Everyone's faces were brimming with joy and anticipation. The air was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. But when the High Priest saw this scene, his vision turned black, and he almost fainted. It's over. This matter can't be hidden anymore. The High Priest knew that no matter what the reason was, he would be severely punished by the God Emperor for leaving his post without permission and causing the supreme divine bead to be stolen. Moreover, if he didn't take the appropriate measures in time, the crime of stealing the supreme divine bead would fall on him. High Priest, the creation altar is about to open, why did you come out? Just as the High Priest's heart was in a mess, Chengju's voice sounded in his ears. He raised his head and saw Chengju looking at him with a puzzled expression. This old man. The High Priest's face turned ugly. He wanted to say something but hesitated. Chengju instantly frowned when he saw his reaction, and he asked via voice transmission, "High Priest, don't tell me that there's a problem with the creation altar. You have never left your post before, but you were absent for 8 hours last night. We're all colleagues, so I can pretend that I don't know. However, once something happens to the creation altar, no one will be able to hide it." Hearing Chengju's words, the high priest immediately gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He looked at Chengju with a solemn expression and transmitted his voice in a grave tone, "Commander Cheng, something big has happened. The fortune altar was destroyed, and the fortune divine pearl was stolen." Ah! Chengju was stunned on the spot. After a while, she recovered and said with a chuckle, "High Priest, this joke is not funny at all." The high priest's expression was very dark. His tone was even more solemn as he said, "Commander Cheng, this old man is not joking. It was absolutely true. It was that bastard Yuan Ji. Last night, he entered the Fortune Divine Palace early and made up a series of lies, tricking this old man into leaving for a few hours. When this old man rushed back, he had already destroyed the altar and stolen the Fortune Divine Pearl." Seeing how serious the high priest was, Chengju realized that something big had happened. His expression turned ugly as he asked in a low voice, "Yuan Ji? No wonder he tried so hard to enter the Fortune Divine Pearl several hours in advance. It turns out that he had the intention to steal the Fortune Divine Pearl. This treacherous bastard is really audacious." After a pause, Chengju frowned and asked again, "But High Priest, this is completely illogical. Yuan Ji has just broken through to the God King realm, and he is a well-known hedonistic young master. The creation altar is a supreme king-grade divine array laid down by the God Emperor. How could Yuan Ji break it with his strength? Moreover, to break 5 supreme-grade divine arrays in 8 hours? This is ridiculous." Chengju believed that the Fortune Divine Pearl was stolen, but she didn't believe that it was Yuan Ji's doing. The high priest's expression turned ugly as he asked angrily, "Chengju, what do you mean? Are you suspecting this old man?" "Ha!" Chengju sneered and said in a low voice, "Before this matter is investigated clearly, everyone is a suspect. We can't get away with it. The most important thing now is to stop these elites and geniuses from entering. Send people to capture Yuan Ji immediately." "Yes. As long as we capture him, the truth will be revealed." The high priest nodded quickly and said through gritted teeth, "This old man will make sure that little bastard dies without a burial place." Chengju ignored him and quickly opened her arms to block the entrance of the divine palace. She said to the hundreds of elites and geniuses, "Everyone, please wait. There is a small problem inside the divine palace, and it will take a moment to deal with it. Please wait outside and don't enter the divine palace." Her deep and majestic voice spread across the square in front of the palace. Following her words, more than 20 imperial guards immediately blocked the entrance of the divine palace with swords and sabers. The elites and geniuses on the steps and in the square in front of the palace were all stunned. The smiles and joy on everyone's faces froze. They all frowned and showed a puzzled and dissatisfied expression. Many of the bolder and more powerful nobles even loudly questioned the reason behind it. "Commander Cheng, what do you mean by this? In the past, every baptism ceremony was safe and sound. Why did something happen when it's our turn? How long will it take you to deal with it? How will you compensate for delaying our baptism? What exactly happened? Please explain, Commander Cheng. Otherwise, we won't believe it." Someone took the lead and shouted, and many people echoed. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of control, everyone became agitated. Chengju looked dignified and shouted coldly, "This is an order. Do I need to explain to you what I do? Whoever dares to take one step into the divine palace will be killed without mercy." Chengju was really angry, and her tone was full of murderous intent. The young elites and geniuses were shocked. They realized the seriousness of the matter and didn't dare to be noisy. They all whispered to each other. Chengju ignored them and quickly discussed countermeasures with the high priest. High priest, the theft of the divine bead is too serious. It's not something you and I can solve. Immediately send a message to Commander Mingi and report the cause of the matter to him. I will now send all the Imperial Guards to search for Yuan Ji in the Divine Palace and Yudu. The high priest was stunned, and his expression was hesitant. He smiled bitterly and said, Commander Cheng, is there a need to alarm Commander Mingi? Even now, he was still hoping that Chengju could bring people to capture Yuan Ji. It was best not to alert Commander Styx or the Blood Hell Marshal. Otherwise, this matter would be difficult to resolve, and he would be severely punished. Chapter 35-47. Hearing the high priest's words and looking at his expression, Chengju sneered. High priest, I know what you're thinking. In fact, Chongzheng and I are responsible for Yuan Ji's entry into the Fortune Divine Palace. All three of us have made mistakes, and we must be punished. If we had the ability to solve this matter, I wouldn't have informed Commander Mingi. But the truth is, this matter is too serious, and neither of us can solve it. Listen to me, report to Commander Mingi immediately. If we're late, our punishment will be worse. The high priest pondered for a moment and nodded, that's right, we'll take the initiative to report the situation and ask for Commander Mingi's punishment. It's better than him coming to question us for our negligence. After the two of them discussed the countermeasures, they began to split up. The high priest quickly took out a transmission jade slip and reported the situation to Commander Mingi. After sending out the transmission jade slip, he hesitated for a moment, then sent a transmission to Chongzheng to explain the situation. By this time, Chengju had gathered more than a dozen Imperial Guards captains and sent out more than 600 Imperial Guards to search the Fortune Divine Palace and Yuda City. Swoosh! 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 The originally tranquil and peaceful Imperial Palace instantly became hostile and oppressive because of the dozen or so Imperial Guards that were brimming with murderous auras as they galloped out. The 100 or so elite geniuses on the square in front of the main hall felt that something was amiss when they saw the Imperial Guards' cold and murderous figures. Their discussion in secret became more intense. Everyone had a premonition that something big had happened. This matter involved the Fortune Divine Palace, and if there was even the slightest problem, it would not be a small matter. Some of the elites and geniuses had high status and were closely related to the Imperial Guards and Internal Affairs Department, or had secret information channels. In less than 15 minutes, these elite geniuses found out the reason. Someone had entered the Fortune Divine Palace in advance last night, tricked the High Priest, destroyed the Fortune Altar, and stole the Supreme Divine Bead. No one would have guessed that the daring bastard was actually the hedonistic young master, Yuan Ji. When these elite geniuses heard the news, they were shocked beyond words, and it took them a long time to recover. Then, their blood boiled with excitement, and they hurriedly told the others about this matter. Regardless of whether they were gloating or seeking novelty, they couldn't help but spread the news. Not long after, close to 100 elite geniuses heard the news. Everyone was dumbfounded. They were so shocked that their minds went blank, and they prostrated themselves in admiration. After a short moment of silence, the crowd burst into a clamor of exclamations and curses. Holy **T. Is Yuan Ji going to defy the heavens? I knew that he was lawless and notorious, but I didn't expect him to be so arrogant. That is an altar built by His Majesty the God Emperor himself. How dare he destroy the altar and steal the divine pearl? We can only accept the baptism of the divine light, but he stole the divine pearls. Awesome. It's so awesome that it's a mess. Young Master Yuan, you are a true warrior. However, that kid won't live past tonight. Everyone, just wait and see. Yuan Ji, you bastard. How dare you eat alone? Now that he has stolen the divine beads, where are we going to receive the baptism of the divine light? Hey! Don't you think this news is ridiculous? With Yuan-Ji's abilities, how could he destroy the altar and steal the divine pearls? It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Yuan-Ji didn't come, so he's a big suspect. Now that such a big thing has happened, he wants to implicate Wind Soaring Domain Chief's manner. What a scammer. Numerous elite geniuses discussed animatedly, and the news quickly spread outside the imperial palace. In just 2 hours, the news had spread throughout Yudu City. Numerous rich and powerful families and strong practitioners had received the news. In an instant, the entire Yudu was discussing this matter. Countless people cried out in astonishment, feeling that it was inconceivable. Of course, everyone who received the news knew that this matter was too serious. A storm of blood was about to break out in Yudu. Qingju brought a few hundred imperial guards and was searching Yudu City. The news of Yuan-Ji stealing the divine pearls also spread quickly in Yudu, and everyone knew about it. The entire Yudu City was filled with an oppressive feeling that a storm was coming. Countless people were watching in secret, waiting for Yuan-Ji to be sentenced to death and for Wind Soaring Domain Chief to be implicated and punished. As for Yuan-Ji, the person involved, he was in a good mood and didn't panic at all. Before stealing the creation divine bead, he had to plan carefully and use a strategy. He couldn't use force. However, after getting the creation divine bead, he was fearless and unrestrained. Since he had the divine bead, he could kill or fight as he pleased. Even if he turned Yudu upside down, he wouldn't be afraid. After leaving the creation divine palace, Ji Tianqing didn't hide his strength anymore. He executed the art of invisibility and escaped the detection of many imperial guards. He left quietly without being discovered by anyone. After escaping the imperial palace, he didn't return to the Thousand Pine courtyard. Because he could guess that the high priest and Qingju would definitely bring people to search there. Therefore, he secretly hid in a courtyard in the West City district. This mansion was located in a rather prosperous area, surrounded by rows of mansions and palaces. The courtyard was a little old and couldn't be considered extravagant or luxurious. Compared to the quiet and unique courtyards and magnificent palaces around it, it was a little shabby. This didn't match Yuan-Ji's high profile and rich style at all. However, this courtyard was indeed Yuan-Ji's. A few years ago, he secretly bought it behind everyone's back and prepared to do some shady business. Now, it was Ji Tianqing's turn to benefit. No one would expect him to hide in this courtyard. As the saying goes, the most dangerous place is the safest. After those imperial guards search the imperial palace, they will definitely search the Thousand Pine courtyard and the few places Yuan-Ji frequents. If they can't find me, they will search the entire city. If they can't find me in Yudu, they will definitely think that I escaped back to the Soaring Wind region and hid in my hometown. Ha ha ha. At that time, the center of the storm will be in the Soaring Wind region, and Yudu will calm down. I will have a chance to leave. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged in a secret room deep under the mansion as he muttered to himself with a cold smile on his face. Before coming to Yudu, he had already thought of his next itinerary and plan. First, he would seize the creation divine bead, then leave the god world through the passage between the two worlds and go to the dragon realm to find Wuhan. Currently, half of the plan was completed. He only needed to wait for the right time to enter the passage between the two worlds. However, he knew that it wouldn't be easy to pass through the passage between the two worlds. The passage between the two worlds was controlled by the god of the underworld, so it would definitely be heavily guarded and guarded by strong practitioners. Now, he had to calm down and plan well. If the theft of the divine bead can cause a bigger commotion and lure Marshal Blood Prison and Commander Mingi out of Yudu, how good would that be? Chapter 35-48. Even though Ji Tianqing was looking forward to this outcome, he knew in his heart that it was almost impossible. Looks like I have to do something to spread this matter. Only then will I be able to lure the tiger away from the mountain. After pondering for a while, Ji Tianqing had an idea. He took out 2 transmission jade slips. He used Yuan Ji's tone to send a message to the 2 jade slips. One of the jade slips was sent to Calm Peace Divine King. The other jade slip was sent to Soaring Wind City's Domain Lord's assistant, Star Thunder Divine King. In the transmission, Star Thunder Divine King clearly stated that he was wrongly accused. It was obviously the High Priest who stole the Fortune Divine Pearl. He had entered the Fortune Divine Palace in advance and happened to witness the High Priest's evil deeds. The High Priest wanted to kill him to silence him, so he could only escape in a sorry state. In order to clear his name, the High Priest poured dirty water on him. But in reality, he was just a first-degree realm low-level god king. How could he have the ability to destroy the altar and steal the divine pearl? Now, there were countless emperor guards searching the city for him. There were also many experts who wanted to capture him. He was panicking and scared, so he could only hide. In the transmission jade slip, Ji Tianqing made up a realistic story, describing himself as being wronged. After doing all this, he took out divine pellets and source stones and started to circulate his cultivation technique to recover his god force. After all, he had been maintaining his peak state to break the array last night, and had exhausted too much of his mental strength. In the depths of the Fortune Divine Palace, inside a magnificent palace, a golden armored guard strode in at a fast pace from the door of a secret chamber with dragons and phoenixes carved on it. This person looked anxious, and his footsteps were hurried. He was holding a transmission jade slip in his hands. Reporting to Senior Commander, the Fortune Divine Palace's High Priest sent a message. He has an urgent matter to report. The golden armored guard held the jade slip and bowed respectfully as he reported. After a while, the secret chamber's door slowly opened. The golden armored guard quickly entered the secret chamber with the jade slip. He stood in the middle of the secret chamber and knelt on one knee as he presented the jade slip. In the middle of the secret chamber's divine array sat a tall and sturdy middle-aged man with a domineering aura. This person was wearing a gray robe and a black cloak. His entire body was filled with an ice-cold aura of death, as if he was the god of death who had walked out from the underworld. He opened his black and white eyes and took the jade slip angrily. He shouted, "Don't you know that I'm cultivating in seclusion to break through to the 9th layer of the king god realm? How big of a matter is it that it would disturb my closed-door cultivation?" The golden armored guard hurriedly kowtowed and apologized, but he didn't dare to explain the situation. The great commander who was like the Grim Reaper was the right-hand man of the god of the underworld, Commander Styx, who was as famous as the Blood Hell Marshal. The Blood Hell Marshal was in charge of killing and war, while he was in charge of internal affairs and punishment. When the god of the underworld was not on the Reincarnation Island, the two of them were in charge. Of course, this was a period of peace without any wars. The Blood Hell Marshal was relatively idle, and Commander Mingi had more authority. He frowned with displeasure and reached out to take the jade slip. As soon as he read 2 sentences with his divine sense, his body stiffened, and his expression became incomparably gloomy. After a moment, when he finished reading the contents of the jade slip, he immediately crushed the jade slip and grinned sinisterly. "Ha ha ha ha, this is the biggest joke in the world. A good-for-nothing who just broke through to the king god realm, known by the whole city, destroyed the creation altar and stole the creation divine pearl. The god of the underworld, the rich resources created by the king god of the underworld, raised a good-for-nothing like the high priest." Commander Mingi was so angry that he laughed. He got up and walked out of the secret room to the study. His entire body was filled with a cold aura of death, and his chest was filled with monstrous anger. "Tell the high priest to come see me. I want to see what tricks he's playing. A good-for-nothing played him like a fool." The golden armored guard said yes and hurriedly went to pass on the order. 100 breaths later. In the study of Commander Mingi's residence. The high priest stepped into the study, trembling with fear, and bowed to the stalwart figure by the window. This subordinate greets the Grand Commander. Commander Mingi's back was to him, and he was looking at the scenery outside the window. However, the study was bone-chillingly cold, and the cold aura of death lingered, causing the high priest to shiver all over. Commander Mingi didn't turn his head. He asked in a cold, low voice, "High priest, tell me. Are you too stupid to be plotted against by that good-for-nothing? Or are you the one who made up this preposterous story?" Before the high priest could answer, he added, "This one time, I will only ask you one question. I'm only going to ask this once. Think carefully before you answer." The high priest didn't hesitate. He said in a sonorous voice, "Grand Commander. This subordinate swears on his godhead that every word this subordinate said in the jade slip is true. It is true that Yuan Ji infiltrated the divine palace, destroyed the altar, and stole the creation divine pearl. He entered the divine palace ahead of time. Both Chongzheng and Chengju can testify to this. As for him destroying the altar and stealing the creation divine pearl, this subordinate saw it with my own eyes." Without waiting for him to finish, Commander Mingi sneered, "If this is true, then you admit that you are worse than a good-for-nothing. The high priest immediately shut his mouth. His face turned pale and he was so ashamed that he wanted to crawl into a hole. Commander Mingi turned around and stared coldly at him. "Look into my eyes." The high priest lowered his head in fear and resistance. He knew that Commander Mingi had the eyes of hell, an inconceivable ability. Not only could he use eye techniques to kill his opponents, but he could also read their souls and memories. "Do you want me to repeat myself?" Commander Mingi frowned and roared again. The high priest had no choice but to slowly raise his head and look into his eyes with a solemn heart. Suddenly, Commander Styx's eyes turned into the eyes of the underworld. They were black and white, and they spun rapidly like a deep vortex. The high priest lost his mind and fell into a coma. Meanwhile, Commander Nether River's consciousness had forcibly invaded his godhead and read his memories. Clearly, this was the best way to verify whether or not he was lying. At the same time, it was also the simplest and most violent method. At this moment, the high priest was like an unconscious puppet, his body frozen in place. His soul, memories, thoughts, and secrets were all exposed to Commander Nether River's eyes. After a full 100 breaths, Commander Mingi retracted his gaze and his eyes returned to normal. The high priest gradually regained consciousness. He had a splitting headache, dizziness, and nausea, but he did not dare to show any dissatisfaction. Commander Mingi frowned and muttered to himself, "The Fengling region lord really raised a good son. He actually deceived everyone. Good for nothing. What a good disguise. I want to see if you are tired of being a region lord. Are you trying to rebel?" With that, Commander Mingi flung his black death cloak and strode out of the study. The high priest hurriedly followed and asked, "Commander, what do you need me to do? Just tell me." He had committed a grave mistake, so of course he had to find an opportunity to show his loyalty to reduce his punishment. Commander Mingi did not give him the chance. "I will personally make a trip to the Fengling region. You don't have to follow." From the looks of it, the Grand Commander wants to personally meet the Domain Lord and exert pressure on the Domain Lord. Calm Peace Divine King was a loyal retainer. He absolutely believed that Yuan Ji was innocent. Therefore, Ji Tianxing hid in the nameless courtyard but was able to control the Calm Peace Divine King to stir up trouble in the city. At the same time, he was also able to gather information from various sources. After reading the contents of the Jade Slip, Ji Tianxing put away the communication Jade Slip and revealed a gratified smile. "Bad news? Commander Mingi has left Yudu and is heading to Soaring Wind Domain personally. This is the best news for me." He didn't care what kind of pressure Soaring Wind Domain Lord would have to endure. He only wanted to lure the tiger away from the mountain and find an opportunity to take action. Soaring Wind Domain Lord's personality is unyielding and unyielding. He is also an old friend of Commander Mingi and Martial Blood Prison. Even if Commander Mingi went to question him face to face, Soaring Wind Domain Lord would evade and deny it. This way, Commander Mingi would have to delay for at least 3 to 5 days before he could return to Yudu. Ji Tianqing frowned and silently analyzed the situation at hand. These 3 to 5 days are the best opportunity for me to take action. However, Martial Blood Prison is still in Yudu. How can I lure him away? Although he won't guard the passage between the two worlds personally, he is still a huge hidden danger. I have to guard against him. It was a pity that Ji Tianqing's time on Reincarnation Island was too short, and his actions were too hasty. He was also alone and didn't have any friends or helpers. Even though he racked his brains for a long time, he couldn't think of a good way to alarm and lure Martial Blood Prison away. If there was enough time, he could slowly plan and come up with a perfect plan. But for now, he could only wait patiently and hope that things would take a turn for the better. Of course, he didn't forget to remind Calm Peace Divine King to pay attention to the movements of the outside world and report any news immediately. Soaring Wind Domain. In the vast and luxurious Domain Lord's manor, on a lonely peak that was thousands of feet tall in the backyard. The peak of the mountain with a radius of 300 feet was surrounded by clouds and mist. There were a few elegant and unique stone houses. There was a towering ancient tree in the small courtyard, and there was a stone table under the tree. It was suitable for drinking tea and playing chess. At this moment, Commander Mingi sat on a stone chair and stared expressionlessly at Soaring Wind Domain Lord in front of him. The Domain Master of the Soaring Wind region was a middle-aged god clan warrior with a huge body and a full beard. He had a rough appearance, and his personality was fiery and stubborn. He was also somewhat domineering and dictatorial. It was because of this personality that Yuan Ji was raised to be an arrogant and hedonistic person. Great Commander, come and have some tea. Soaring Wind Domain Lord raised the teapot with a smile and poured a cup of spirit tea for Commander Mingi. He looked normal, and there was no change in his expression. He didn't panic or worry. Commander Mingi raised the teacup and took a sip. He sneered and said, "You boorish brute, when did you start learning how to make tea? You even live alone on this mountain peak. Are you going to cultivate your body and mind?" Soaring Wind Domain Lord nodded and said with a smile, "I was indeed rude and boorish in the past, so I'm trying to change. By the way, Great Commander, how does this heavenly spring spirit tea taste?" Commander Mingi sneered again and said in a playful tone, "Yuan Ba, don't talk nonsense with me. You should know why I'm here." Yuan Ba raised the teacup and slowly tasted it. He said leisurely, "Great Commander, we used to fight side by side and were like brothers. Let's not talk about the distant past. Let's talk about the most recent battle. It was 1,000 years ago in the Outer Realm. We worked together to kill Kenshin. That great battle left both of us heavily injured and we almost lost our lives. At that time, if you and I didn't help each other, we wouldn't be alive now. Now that you and I are in high positions, we've been idle for too long. We've been blinded by fame and fortune. We've forgotten our brotherhood and are only interested in small things. Don't you think it's funny?" Then he put down the teacup and looked at Commander Mingi with a smile. Commander Mingi frowned. His face was a bit gloomy as he said in a low voice, "Yuan Ba, are you reminding me not to forget our old relationship? Are you reminding me to be considerate in this matter and punish your playboy son lightly?" "No, no, no." Soaring Wind Domain Lord hurriedly waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm just thinking about the brotherhood of the past. As for my son, he didn't do anything. How can he be punished?" You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.